This. I'm not too sure who we have on. There's many rumors and names being tossed around as far as who could possibly be our next guest. Um, I guess I don't know. Is there a way of identifying you behind that mask?
Well, I think we should get rid of this foolishness and get down to the
Oh,
reality here.
oh
So the
man,
reality of it is, I it's a composite. My son and me both are Billy Trident. So it's not fair to have a face. But more importantly is a deeper story. When I was first exposed to the internet in about 1985, from the bulletin board system. You're familiar with that?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Right, exactly. Well, I
prehistory.
use a lot of these terms like modem and baud rate and stuff, and people look at me like, "What the fuck are you? Where are you from? Outer space?"
When are you from?
So, right, exactly. When are you from? Who knows when I'm from? When disco was cool, that's when I'm from. And we went over to see a guy, and he was telling me about the internetwork. They didn't even call it the internet then. There was no internet. And you know what he told me? In the midst of a haze of LSD and marijuana, and this is a great story. This guy was a very, very involved early BBSer, the anarchy groups. That's what it was based. The early stuff was into. He's looked at me and he said, "Anything you put on the internet work is going to be there forever." And he was fucking right.
He
And
was
I never put my face on the internet because of that. And I still have not to this day. And he was
I
right. Dude, I'll go back old posts. People don't realize how long I've known you.
yeah.
Go back early 2000s to forums.
Early 2000s on probably Blade forums when I was active back then.
Yes,
Um,
yes. And you can discuss that if you want, but the
yeah,
tomahawk, the interesting posts, and you must have been a kid then.
I was in my 22, 23 era, somewhere
I've
around
seen
there.
these posts by this oddball guy. You can mention the name if you want, because everybody will research it. The posts are still there, dude.
Yeah.
My posts are still there when I used a completely different name. No,
Yep.
no, no face, of course, but and that was the whole thing. So that's how long I've been on the internet. And prior to that, like I said, about 85 was my first time taking the headset and you put it in the old rubber deal. You ever see that?
Yeah.
Early modem stuff. Yeah, yeah.
The
So
the 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 amount of information that I've gleaned and learned from you over the years, and you are a historian in a lot of ways, but like historian is not the word because you actually did a lot of shit yourself. Um, for people that might not know who you are, and they might not know who you are after this, anyways. Uh, Billy Billy Trident is the moniker that you are currently utilizing and have been utilizing for a while now. A lot of people might have spotted some of elements of your gear in other people's posts on Instagram. Might have seen some of your work out there. Also might follow you on your amazing Instagram account, which is basically this historical document of all things that a lot of us weren't allowed to own when we were kids, or a lot of us would buy secretly, or a lot of us would fantasize about owning. You not only lived that life, you also owned a lot of these objects and collected a lot of these objects that are now unobtainable or only available in an image or a picture. My interactions with you from forum days to now have always been that of somebody that a lot of these things I only saw in pictures and books, or in a movie, or um, on some sort of manual to identify certain types of drugs or munitions. You actually owned and experimented and played with a lot of these things. I think before we need to get back to the beginning, or whatever beginning you can share with us. What uh, what makes Billy get a trident, I guess, would be the question. Like, what brought you into this world of the dark arts, if we can say
well, I would say the Bible.
the Bible?
The Bible. So
Okay.
my parents were King James Version Christians. and they were heavily involved in the survivalist movement of the 70s. Now, a lot of people might not know what a Christian patriot is or any of these old terms. They'll have to research that. And my dad was also a federal agent and a narcotics agent for the sheriff's department. So there's an odd thing. Now, as a contrast, his brother was a professional takeover armed robbery guy that specialized in payrolls at grocery stores. There's some family dinners.
That's
So my dad had once arrested him. That was a family dinner. That was very, those are those weird stories. So my dad, he was a policeman, and you being a former policeman understand paperwork and the police business and how you guys operate, you
yeah.
know. So he was always kind of secretive. I'm like, what do you do? How does it work? How does this work? And he's like, it's police business. That's what he would say. What are you working on? Did you see any dead bodies? Did you this? He's like, it's police business. Well, that led me to start going through his paperwork. The thing that was unusual about me is I learned how to read in the first grade phonetically. And then I developed a high level of comprehension. I'm not very smart. I'm basically a dropout in the third grade, but I have a weird comprehension level. I was reading things like the Merck Manual, the Physician's Desk Reference, Tabler's Cyclopedic Medical Dictionary in the third and fourth grade. So
Where are
I
you
started
getting?
going through.
Where are you finding these books? Is
My
this like a
father,
home library?
my
Your home
father
library?
was a combat medic in Vietnam. So there you go. Kind
Your
of a
home li
pseudo doctor. I tease him. I'm like, you weren't a doctor. Interestingly enough, my daughter is an NP. She is a doctor. But anyway,
so,
so
your uncle the takeover
yes,
robber,
bad guy.
and your dad is secretive about his stuff, but he's into some things, and I've seen hints and glints into what he knew and what he was into from your post. But you say he's quiet with you about what he did. You're
And yes,
what about the takeover?
the more criminal that I became, the more my dad grew distance from me. Because, and I look back on it and I think, the old man, I was kind of hard on him. Even though he's still alive, he's in his mid 80s. His friends would come by, which were all the police, and I'd say shit like off the pig. I'm 8, 9 years old. That's very disrespectful. And he told me, later on in life, he said, you made it very hard on me. He said, I had my brother, because already he's not trusted. If you're a policeman with a criminal in the family that's overt, you know that
Yeah, yeah,
it's hard. They're like, well, if he's doing this, this is your brother and now your son. What's up, dude? Maybe
yeah.
you're dirty. You know what I
Where
mean?
where are you getting this anti? Where are you getting that lingo that you're saying to your dad's friends? Where is that coming from?
So my dad being involved, being a federal agent and stuff, and at that time frame, there was a lot of groups that you may or may not know of. The Weathermen, the SDS, the SLA. Have you ever heard of these?
No.
The Symbionese Liberation Army, Patty
Okay.
Hearst. I watched that
Okay.
live on TV. I'm that old.
Okay.
The SDS was the Students for a Democratic Society, and the Weathermen actually blew themselves up in a famous thing. They fucked up. So these were all anti-government forces that are mostly forgotten today, that specialized in the bombing of police stations, assassination of police, all very, very unusual activities. The SLA is the easiest one to research. So because he was a federal agent and he was involved in I guess, rooting out these people that were involved in un-American activities. You ever heard these
Okay.
terms?
Yep.
Yes, the commies, the pinkos. You know, he had a lot of this paperwork, stuff written by Don Cisco. Don Cisco is the guy that went on to write the Poor Man's James Bond. You've heard of that?
Awesome. I have a digital copy of that somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, his real name and what he originally wrote was the Militant's Formulary under Don Cisco. That's one of the first books I read, third grade. So I'm reading all this political stuff. Abby Hoffman steal this book. Have you ever read that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There you go. There you have it. I'm reading that shit in third grade.
That
So
that's
I'm radicalizing
you're
myself.
Radical. When you're reading uh, these manifestos, when you're reading about these organizations that are basically taking the fight to the police, and you have, I mean, your dad's one. Um, w- what is the like in your kid head? You know, it's like I was a punk rock kid and an anarchist, and I fucking hated the cops when I was a
Right.
kid, but I hated them because I mean, they would fucking stop me and steal my skateboard or fucking take my money or beat the shit out of me because I was brown and I was skateboarding in a neighborhood that was not of my color. Um, for you, what was the anger based around this? Like, is this just
I
rebelling
wasn't
against
angry.
your?
I wasn't angry at all. So what at that time I was young. You got to think, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. You're what? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It wasn't anger. I was just studying. And to bring this stuff to school, when you start talking to other 3rd and 4th, 5th graders, hey, are you familiar with the SDS and their bombing of the Democratic Convention? Kids are like, uh fucking weird. This guy. So it didn't work out. It never worked out until I got in the 7th grade. And once I got in the 7th grade, suddenly the school that I went to was 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. And suddenly everything that I had been looking for was there. The chicks had tits. The dudes were wearing fucking shirts with pot leaves on them and that said cocaine. They had long hair. They had earrings because they were this wide, age range. And suddenly I'm like, this is where I wanted to be. It wasn't working in the 5th and 6th grade, dude.
No, you were ahead of your time, basically. I imagine.
Well, I think I was a little crazy. I think closed head injuries. I knocked my eyesight out in a wreck when I was 7. And I mention this to people because I want other people to understand that, they're not alone. So I think that knocked,
Yeah,
literally, it rattled
a,
my brain.
a
No,
ma-
my family I kind of gave up on my family at 7.
yeah.
Like
I
my
mean,
family would go to like the carnival, right? That's a common thing.
yeah.
I'd sit in the car. They're like, well, you want to go ride the rides? I'm like, no. My mom's like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, nothing's wrong with me.
Massive TV,
I'm not
massive
going to
TBI.
ride the rides. So my family was like, my dad was like, this guy, man, he's seeing it in me. And my mom, I got to say, I got to give a shout out to her. My mom has been supportive of me since day one, and she took some rough rides. There were some rough rides. As I got older, 15, 16, rough, rough. And, my mom was there. My dad, he had long given up on me. I got kicked out at 15. I came home one day and my mom was like, you got to be out of here in a couple hours. I'm like, what do you mean? She said, well, your dad gets home from work and you got to be out of here. And I said, well, what does that mean? She said, you got to leave the house. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's cool. I get it.
Where I'll ask, because I went through kind of some of the similar thing, but at 14, and I wasn't kicked out. It was just like nobody was home.
I
So
had
it
a
was
good
like,
family. See, that's another
yeah,
thing that always confused people. And my street partner was an interesting character too, because he had a good family. Most kids that we associated with, and when I say kids, we were all the same age.
yeah,
They didn't have families. They had what you're talking about. There was
yeah.
nobody home or they were shooting dope.
At 15, you get this notification. I mean, you grew up with this. A TBI sounds like what you got when you were a kid, which if you believe in the shamanic experience, it means that you were basically struck by lightning or something like that. And that's kind of like the same thing.
When I knocked my eyesight out, yeah,
Yeah,
I was blind for 3 hours. I come
that's
running up to the house after this bike accident. I was doing a trick.
that's a
And you
miss.
want to talk about a terror for a parent. And I had this huge hematoma on my head. I hit so hard it embedded concrete into my head. And I go up there, blood and everything. And my mom's like, oh my God, what have you done? And then suddenly, I shit you not, dude. And I've tried looking this up, and there are some light references, just like a fucking TV static. My eyesight went out. And I
Yeah,
said, Mom, I'm blind. And she's like, oh, fuck. She don't
yeah.
cuss, but she's like, whoa. I go to the hospital, and the doctor was basically like, yeah, his eyesight may come back and it may not.
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh, thank you." And this is the '70s, so you don't get a lot of, there
Yeah,
wasn't
you're
a
not
lot
gonna
from our eyes or anything. It was like, "Hey, he wrecked. He may be
yeah,
okay." And luckily, obviously, it came back, but it probably knocked some sense in me or out of me.
but probably both, I think. There's always a sacrifice.
Well, I quit
Uh,
school. I mean, I quit learning. I was no longer studying their books. I was no longer had any interest in the school at all. None.
you get to 15, you have this divide in your life. You say your family was great. You were just it
They were
was
good.
that
I had brothers and
you
sisters. Well, I still do. Many. I have a brother. He's a great guy, and two sisters. I'm the oldest.
you as the eldest, you get told at 15 you're out.
Yeah,
Um is like what is your reaction to this? Are you ready for it? Are you
I didn't care.
angry? Are you
I
trying to
didn't.
figure
It didn't matter. The problem is at that time is I just thought everything was kind of like a joke. It was just another thing, and they were making a decision, especially my dad. I was heavily involved in the occult. They didn't know it at the time, but my girlfriend was pregnant. I was selling dope. I was heavily involved in that culture. All my friends were criminals in some respect. Even the ones that were just light level, they were all criminals, which has always amazed me how 15-year-olds, because a lot of people are like, how can you send a 15-year-old to adult prison? I'm like, I knew 15-year-olds that were killers. They were dangerous people. They were rapists. They were dudes planning to fucking rape. That's is that a child? No. And that's where a lot of people don't understand. I'm sure you encountered the same type of people. Just because you're 13 and 14, you may have a child's mindset and that kind of magical thinking maybe, but you're dangerous.
yeah,
You can be
there's
very dangerous.
some kids grew up with examples at home or the experience. They get visited by whatever this is. I mean, I saw a lot of people who were into like a lot of pedophiles that I encountered. What blew my mind most about a lot of them is that they were victims of the same thing themselves and they were perpetuating it. Um,
Right. Right.
but like, but you say pedophiles, but also like 15, 14 year olds doing some of this horrible shit. And it's a learned behavior that was visited upon them,
Right.
and it's, yeah, like, the horrible evil has no age,
Well, that was
specific.
what was interesting about me and my street partners, both coming from decent homes. I wasn't beaten. I wasn't there was no anything in my house that was strange. I think the strangest thing in my house was me. I was
You
the weirdo. I was the black sheep. And my street partner, his family was great too. They were real cool. And it was real funny how people in school, the authorities in school, they were like, "Oh, you must have a horrible home life." I'm like,
no.
I didn't even talk. I wouldn't talk. That was another thing that I did a lot of that was strange in my behavior. I wouldn't talk because the right to remain silent. And I read the Miranda card and I read all that bullshit from fucking Abby Hoffman and all those guys. And my child's mind took that as whenever you're in a
Shut
room with the authority, I
shut
fucking
up.
didn't talk, dude. You want
Yeah.
to unnerve human beings? You're 13 with the vice principal, and you fucking are under indictment for whatever, probably did do it all, and you don't speak, you don't talk. He's like, well, I'll have to call your mom. I said,
As you're exiting your family, life, you mentioned that you were deep into the occult, and I don't know too much
very
about
deep.
the time frame you're speaking of, but this sounds like
70s,
the yeah, but yeah, I bet I wasn't through I didn't go through it, but I've heard about this time,
satanic panic.
and yeah, this is Satanic Panic era.
Yeah,
This is after Flower Child of the
yeah.
'60s and all that stuff. All of these ideas are now spread out. Um, what are you seeing, or what are you being influenced by that you
So
say like the occult was a part of your
I learned about the occult from Sunday school, from the Bible.
That
They're
tracks.
teaching, you know, John 3:16 and Psalms and stuff. I'm digging deeper. I'm digging into Lot and his daughters. I'm digging into Noah. I'm digging into Job. You know what I'm saying? The
Yeah.
deeper things, the deals with the devil. You know what I'm saying? All the deeper parts of the Bible. And the most interesting part of the Bible, and I can't remember the exact verse, it talks about pharmakia sorcery. It's in there.
Yeah, yeah.
Pharmakos, it's Greek, pharmakia. And I'm like, that's what I want to be. At 7, 8 years old, I'm like, I want to be a pharmakist sorcerer.
A drug sorcerer for people that might not catch
Exactly. And
what you
that's
say.
exactly what I wanted to be. And I had to figure out how to do it. And it took me until the 7th grade to figure it out. And that's why I started studying the PDR and all that. You know what the PDR is? The
No.
Bible of pills, the
The
physician's
Bible.
desk reference. That's what
Okay.
all, and to my knowledge, it's still used today. It's the Bible of pills, dude. It is a medical book, thousands of pages. Everything's in there. So I studied that so that I knew what pills to recognize.
So you're 15, you're seeing elements of the Bible that are
Well, I was
ignored or
seven
yeah,
and eight when I learned the pharmakia.
but this is like you're at 15 with these ideas in you.
Oh yeah,
Specifically the ideas of becoming a pharmaceutical.
Tw-
It sounds funny,
12,
but you're trying to
7th
figure out
grade.
you're trying to figure out how to get into the position of being a sorcerer, a drug sorcerer, basically,
Yeah.
or somebody that utilizes. Are you aware of what intentions do you have with this idea of becoming the sorcerer? Like for me, like I remember reading about shamanism and what a shaman is, and seeing some identifying marks in myself about that, and saying, "Hmm, I might have to go to the underworld one day." In my fucking stupid mind. Be careful what you wish for. Um, in your case, where are you going with these ideas? Like, where are they taking you?
Well,
This
you're only influenced. You know, a lot of people they don't realize the scope of an influence in a person's life, and you can only be influenced by what you're involved in. So I'm going to school to Sunday school because my parents, right, and also the uncle that I mentioned. Now he was a very unusual individual. Like I said, he was a speed addict. He was a heroin addict. He was a armed robbery guy. Drove fancy cars. He dressed fancy. He was scary as fuck. He was 6'3", 250 pounds, and he did not fuck around. And I also had another uncle, my mom's brother. He was a cool guy, man. He was a very cool individual. He wasn't necessarily a criminal. He may snort a little cocaine. He had long hair. He may go to the discos. He drove the coolest muscle cars. So these people had great influences on me. I'm like, the Bible is in my head. I want to be a pharmakia sorcerer. I need a muscle car. I need a 3/4 link leather jacket. I need a fucking toke stone on a necklace. I need an earring. I need fucking tattoos. All this shit. And my one uncle is the first guy I ever seen that had tattoos on his neck. Now, he'd done a lot of prison time. And as you know, a lot of tattoos come out of the prison culture.
Yeah,
And back then, you had tattoos on your neck, get to the other side of the street.
yeah.
That's a bad motherfucker because people didn't fake it like they do today. I hate tattoos today. I got to tell you that. And I have
Y
a bunch.
you go on to be independent. Like, how are you maintaining yourself after you leave home? Like, what are you doing to, like how are you figuring this out? What's your
Well, when I first got kicked out, I I I had a grandma, my mother's mother, sharp lady. My dad always said, "Oh yeah, she was a prostitute in the 50s," which is very disrespectful, but you know what? She could have been. That lady had at least 25 wedding rings on a band that she kept. And I said, "Grandma, where'd you get all these wedding rings?" She said, "Grandma knows." Grandma knows. And why are your eyes so dilated, boy? Grandma knew everything there was. And she was a nice lady until the day she's like, "I got to ask you to leave because you're selling too much dope out of that basement window."
shit?
And I'm like, "You're right, Grandma." I loved her. She was
Yeah.
smart. And she was
Yeah.
not judgmental. She's like, I know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I lived there for a while, and then from there,
What were you selling? Like, what was the what
at
was
that time,
the product?
microdot LSD, purple microdot, they were little barrels, and marijuana.
Different times. Different.
I
What was you know, like, there was no social media back then. Still fucking fentanyl bullshit. It's
right.
word of mouth, it's experience, it's like getting the plug. How
Getting
was
out
this
there, man, connections. So every day I would get up and I had developed this thing. I was like, every day I'm going to do something and not get up and brush your teeth and fucking eat something. Every day I wanted an adventure. So I got to get my fucking ass up, which, by the way, when I say get my ass up, you got to realize this is like 6 or 7 p.m. I only
Yeah.
operate at night. Dude, I had to sleep. Fucking, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if
Yeah.
you know anything about the hallucinogenic culture. You know, it keeps you up. Anyway, I'd get up and I'd go about my adventure. So you got to develop connections. So at that time, there was a big cruising culture on the weekends, you know, cars cruising.
Yeah.
There'd be hundreds of people on the sidewalk. There'd be hundreds of cars, Friday night, Saturday night. Go down there, get connections. There was a big park, and they used to have what was called Stoner Hill. And if you wanted anything, there was dudes playing hacky sack and frisbee that had whatever you wanted. And by the way, a real common pipe back then was built into frisbees. These guys that were just playing frisbee, you ever heard of those?
Yeah. No, no, no.
Yeah, yeah,
Enlighten
yeah.
us.
The pipe was in the frisbee, dude. It was great, you know. So I'd go down there and just, you know, you just trip around and you're just looking for connections. You got to know who to approach, you know. And I sold joints for $1. That was a standard thing. LSD
What
was $5 a hit.
what would you look for in people that you would approach or avoid? Like, what
Well,
were
for
you
one
looking at?
thing is anybody over 18, when you're below 18, is a fucking cop. When you hit 18, because time marches on, anybody
Yeah.
over 21 is a fucking cop. When you're 21, you gotta, I don't know.
So
It changes.
your profiling age is to avoid, but what are you looking for as far as being open with people? Like, I don't know, like, are you seeing the way they dress? Are you,
Yeah.
like, listening to their stories to
Hair,
see if they match up? Are you fucking doing
hair,
your social engineering? Hair?
hair. The way that your hair is. Your hair was very specific back then. Dude, if you had so we're talking 78, 79, 80. Those time frames, the early 80s, people are like, "Oh yeah, I remember the 80s. Mullets, neon." I'm like, "I ain't my fucking 80s. I never seen none of that shit." My 80s was patchouli oil, long hair, black leather jackets, designer jeans, Nike tennis shoes, rock shirt. No, no.
Yeah.
So you asked me how I would, little tests. Okay. Here's a simple one. You ready? You see somebody, you walk up to him, you say, "Hey, what the fuck's going on, man? Dude, what kind of music you listen to, man?" Black Sabbath, Pink Floyd. "Hey, you want a fucking doobie?" You see?
Yeah.
What kind of music you listen to? That's a big one, especially at that time. Because everybody today knows Black Sabbath, but you got to remember something. Black Sabbath was not a popular band in the 70s. Most people were like, fucking, and I'm talking people that were into fucking AC/DC. Fucking Sabbath, don't put that shit on, it'll put the party to sleep. They were not what people think. They were kind of hated, actually. People were like, "Ah, those guys fucking suck."
Would you say that back then, all of these bands and all the culture around these bands was a way for
Huge,
the drug culture to basically I mean,
huge,
these bands were basically
pushing
I
it.
mean, yeah, that's exactly. I mean,
You know what I
y
call it? And
sh
Cheech and Chong and all that? I used to call it this, free advertising.
yeah, well,
I'm like,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
free advertising, man. When
yeah,
heavy metal came out in 1980, the movie, you know, everybody that I knew went to see it one night at the premiere in the proper form, LSD 25. But, you know, That movie, it's drug culture shit, dude. It's got a huge cocaine scene in it. It's got everything about it was drug culture, all that stuff. Pink Floyd, The Wall. Even though it's real funny that Pink Floyd, the band, denies everything. They're like, oh, we smoked a little hash, we did a little of this. It may or may not be true. But, all those bands today, they deny it all. Jimmy
Yeah,
Page, oh, I read a few occult books. Dude, you fucking bought Aleister Crowley's house. You wrote So Mote It Be on your fucking albums, man, scratched in there in the wax, in the
yeah.
original pressings of Led Zeppelin 3. Oh, I read a couple of Gavin and Yvonne Frost books. Dude, these guys were pushing that shit heavy duty.
Do
Everybody
you
fucking knew that.
when you're going through this experience? I mean, this is an amazing time to kind of be young and figuring shit out. Um, like you're making a living pushing shit on this hillside, kind of making connections. Basically, back then there's no
Never
internet, so you're
pushing. I was not a pusher. There was the mythical pusher, but I would not consider
Can you
myself a pusher.
explain what the difference is between a pusher and what you were?
Okay, so let me tell you, we'll start off with I got along absolutely great with drug users and drug abusers. Absolutely, those were my people. Addicts, I do not like them to this day. I did not get along with them, and I'm sorry to insult anybody, but if you let the chemical control you, you miss the fucking point. So you don't push anything on anybody. It's like the old myth. Oh God, you don't want that weed. It's got some angel dust in it. Dude, there was no free rides. There was no mythical guy fucking selling angel. That was an extra price. That was 50 cents more if you wanted fucking a dusted joint. So you don't push it. You're just like, hey man, you want to try LSD? Have you ever tried it? And if people were like, I've never tried it. I'm like, well, you may not want to.
Yeah. Okay.
You may want to be real careful. I mean, I was real coherent about that stuff. I'm like, you know what? If you're going to try LSD, I want to make sure that you have somebody with you, a guide, an experienced person.
Okay.
It's very important. You don't just
That's a
load up some chick at a party with LSD, dude. It ain't going to work.
that's a great thing to talk about. I'm new. I've never done LSD. I show up on this hillside. You look at me. I'm not a cop. Whatever. I say, you know what? I want to try LSD, but it freaks me out. I don't know what to expect. What would your pitch be, or how would you like what would you tell this individual who's never tried it before, who wants to try it? You say a guide.
I would discourage it to most people LSD at that point, unless they knew somebody. I say, do you fucking know anybody that fucking has been into that? Can you, do you have a trip partner or something? Because
Why?
it's not a good
Why?
idea.
Why isn't it a good idea? Like,
Well, because you can make mistakes, man. You can make mistakes. The visual distortions and stuff just alone of crossing a street can be a real problem. You could get hurt. You cannot be used to it. You can get into your head and you can have mental problems and stuff. A very, very close friend of mine, the drummer in our band, I watched him. This is no bullshit, dude. This is 100% straight up. I watched him flip to schizophrenia one night on a heavy, heavy LSD trip. He was a very experienced tripper. And one night what had happened is he had got hit. He was tripping around on Everclear and Valium. There's a fucking combo for you. And he got hit by a car, and it fucked his head up. He had to learn how to walk and shit. And you're never the sharpest person in the room. We all went up to the hospital to support him, and the doctor came out and he looked at us and he says, "I'm going to tell you guys something right now. I don't want this guy taking LSD." And we're looking at each other going, "How the fuck does this guy know that?" I mean, we looked the part, trust me. Anyway, after he learned how to walk, about 6 months out, he took about 4 hits of a very, very high quality blotter. It was loaded, and he tripped over schizophrenia, and to this day he's still a
and
schizophrenic.
we've I've heard some of these
It's
people,
true.
and had a cousin who went through something like it.
Yes,
Um,
it's not a myth.
It's not a myth. It's not a myth.
No.
We have the saying in Mexico called "se quedó arriba." He stayed high, but
Yeah.
what you
Yeah.
how you describe it as schizophrenia. Um, Like,
He was
like
diagnosed with schizophrenia. So how it works is in his family, it must have been in his family. He may have
yeah,
eventually developed it anyway. And LSD can bring that out in people. Peter Green from Fleetwood Mac, he's a very famous one. Sid Barrett from Pink Floyd, there's another one. There's many famous people that you can point to. Those are just some names that people recognize. And you want to be very careful with LSD. You know what I tell people about LSD back in the day? They're like, well, I took mushrooms. I'm like, LSD ain't mushrooms. It ain't fucking mushrooms, dude.
no, it's
Well,
not.
I took a fucking quarter ounce. I'm like, yeah, that's a good dose, man. I bet you were fucking laughing your ass off. It ain't mushrooms, dude. And
It's
I know people discredit LSD for some reason and stuff, but I got to tell you what, that shit will fuck your mind up. And you may not even know it.
That's
You may
scary.
not know it.
That's kind of scary to think about. You could take a drug that is going to affect your mind in such a profound way that you might not even be aware the edges of or how that has happened, but you're just changed. That's fucking wild.
So I had a great teacher. There was this woman that we met, and she was a little bit older than us, and her it wasn't her husband, but her significant other. They had been in the Haight Ashbury district, and they had been connected with the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. Do you know who that
Yeah.
was?
No, no.
Orange Sunshine and all that heavy shit. Owsley, dude, when I started talking to her and she's like, I was there. I was at Berkeley. I was there. I was like, oh my God. I'm on my knees and I'm like, I am here to drink from this fountain. And her husband's like, these guys are fucking weirdos, man. Because it's got suddenly all these 16-year-old kids are, around this woman. She was ugly as sin, dude, but inside she was the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. And he was a very cool dude too. He'd done roadie work for quite a few very interesting bands. But anyway, that's beside the point. I want to stay somewhat on the subject. She taught me a lot about LSD, and I asked her one time, I said, how does the LSD of the 80s compare to the LSD of the 60s? And it took me years to decipher this. She said the LSD of the 60s was full of hallucination. The LSD of the 80s is full of illusion.
Huh.
And I'm like, oh my God. And I finally figured it out about 2 years later, where I'd thought about that for so long. And we were always chasing the 60s Owsley acid, the mind changing couple hits, and you're completely indoctrinated into this mind expanding culture. That chemist Owsley was creating some of the most pure, and for some reason, even to this day, no one has been able to replicate it. And that's a complicated chemical. I got lucky and I met what was called a bathtub chemist. Now, he didn't mean he was actually working in a bathtub, but it meant smaller batches. But the thing about LSD chemists is they want to do big batches. They don't, it's not a little fucking deal. It's not like a shake and bake meth guy in the trailer. They want to make thousands, tens of thousands of hits. So in order to find a chemist, it's very rare. It's a closed culture. It takes years to find anybody that's decent in it. And I eventually, through just by chance, met a guy, and I was able to get blotter acid for roughly maybe $2 a hit wholesale, and it was easily sell for $5 at the time. So this was blotter, and it was good.
You
If
you
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 took,
I'm listening, but I like this is part is like fascinating to me. You said that, the difference between the 60s
yeah,
and the 70s and later on the 80s. Now, do you think it the whatever that chemical was, you're talking about something
it's
that's
the same
mind
chemical
expanding.
when it's made correctly. Remember that.
Yeah, clear. Do you think it's the reason it's changed is because, 1, it's not the same chemicals now? That there's something
I
changed?
don't know anything about today, but I know
Okay, well,
LSD made correctly is the same chemical. What it had to do with, and Lemmy figured this out. You know Lemmy?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I
okay.
Kill Mister.
Yeah.
Yeah, he there's an interview where he figured it out. See, the famous thing was in the late 70s, early 80s was you couldn't take LSD every day. You couldn't do it. If you took a hit today and you took one tomorrow, it really didn't work. And Lemmy, in a famous interview, said, I broke the code, man. All you, because everybody had this thing. Oh, you got to take a bunch of vitamin C. You got to, there was all these things, dude. But all it was is very simple. And Lemmy broke it. He said, man, all you need to do is double the dose. And, but that gets into dangerous territory. And
Yeah,
that's what he was
that's
talking about. It was weaker. There was less. The
okay.
micrograms were less. The LSD of the 60s was fucking badass. From what I hear, four-way window pane and shit, which was a gelatin acid, was fucking, dude, you better be ready, man. You better be ready for that. You better have a trip partner with you, and you better be ready to really get into your head. And
You
I
you
think that
you
over
you
time,
it changed probably, and you mentioned this trip partner, okay?
got to have a trip partner.
What does a trip partner entail for a journey of this level? Like, what who
We
who could
never tripped without a trip partner, ever. None of
okay.
it. None of us. Once in a while, and I don't really want to say myself, but we'll say somebody did occasionally go out on that limb after they were experienced and would do it alone. But you better be really experienced.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
mean,
it's
we, again, the only experience that I have with hallucinogens are traditional ones, from where I grew up, and there's a reason why
psilocybin.
psilocybin, bufo, but that's, but nothing of this nature, nothing of the, like nothing like acid. But
Psilocybin to me is permagrin, which is what we used to call it, smiling, very happy, laughing, some visuals. You can kind of get some hallucinations maybe if you take large amounts. The stuff today may be better. The stuff in my day was it only came around once a year because it was gotten out in fields under cow shit. There was
the
only one mushroom grower back in my day. It was so rare. It's so common today, but it was so rare that I met one guy who was a Vietnam vet with no legs. That's a great story. That guy there, smart motherfucker, growing in agar in mason jars in 1981. It was like God. Once again, I was like, dude, I'm here. Yeah.
you, the out of all the things that I've taken, and again, I haven't taken anything like this, but I've taken traditional medicine, mostly to try and figure out some of my own bullshit. Um, I took the Tura though. The
Ugh.
Tura was
Sickening.
n- it
Ugh.
it was it
Gross.
wasn't it was in a liquid it was in a liquid format. I didn't know exactly what this fucking thing was. I was going through this.
Those are
Um,
acetylcholine inhibitors, and I consider them gross. Didn't you kind of feel
it
like kind of rigid
it
in your muscles, sick?
it it wasn't it wasn't a good experience.
No, it's bad. The witch drugs are all bad.
Um,
Belladonna, all that stuff, hyoscyamine, all the scopolamine stuff is the traditional witch drugs, the flying stuff.
yeah.
Dude, you better be, you're rotting your brain. I mean,
The the feeling that I got, yeah, this dread,
Mhm.
this, my jaws were kinda locked. I could
Yeah,
feel it, like, on my head and my
yeah.
body, but the drop, like, it was, boom, you're hallucinating. It felt that way, like a wet blanket just dropping on you. Um,
Well, you're lucky because that stuff
the
can be dangerous.
yeah, and it was only later on that I kind of figured some of these things out. Just as far as the danger factor of some of these fucking horrible things.
They're
Some of
poisons.
them, some of them,
All drugs are poisons, but they're toxic, dude.
yeah. I always tell people that the Tura thing is a
No, you
cabron.
did it once and you'll never do it again.
No, the SETIs, and like there's a native group in Sonora. They would do these trips with Bufo, which is also pretty powerful, but not dreadful. They sometimes do them in sand dunes because there's There's no way to split your head open in the
You know,
sand dune.
that's interesting what you just said right there, where you said it's good, it's powerful, but not powerful. So it's very interesting when you talk to some people in the drug culture. They're like, "Oh, I took a hit of LSD and my face melted off." I'm like, "That's bullshit. You didn't do anything." You know what I'm saying? You can
Yeah.
tell what people have done by their certain level of whatever. You know, some of the stories about LSD, for instance, you know, are like, no. No, dude. That's I don't know what you're talking about, you know? And
C
I
c
don't have any experience with DMT as far as I know. I think I may have been dosed
Dose?
on it once, maybe.
Why do you suspect DMT, and, like, can you explain what that experience was like?
So, are you familiar with the concept of friends helping friends in the drug culture?
Not really. You're gonna have
Okay,
to
so
walk me
it's
through.
like, you know, you meet another stoner and you know he's a stoner and you're like, "Here, man. Here, try this."
Okay,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
sitting in 8th grade class, and this chick, which I should have got to know her better, she was kind of a rival dealer, and so we kind of shied away from her, and my friend had me convinced she was a lesbian, which didn't really matter to me, but at the time, you know, that was kind of a stigma, which I really should have gotten to know her. And she pokes me in the back, and she was like, "Hey, I seen you around. Try this." And it's this little white tab, this pill, okay?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. So starting a class, I take it. Within 30 minutes, I'm like, I don't know if I told the lady I had to go or what happened. I barely made it out of the hall. The hall is completely twisting. I barely made it out of the door. I went outside. There was a berm where there was a tennis place where people used to come and play tennis. I just, boom, hit the ground right there. I'm not sure if people were playing tennis, but I watched the most incredible tennis match of my life. I have no idea what was going on. I have no idea where I was or what was going on. But I'll tell you what, out of all the stuff I've done, that hit me fucking hard. She got me.
For people that have never done any of this, like, when you talk about hallucination, like, you talk about the whole, "Yeah, my face melted off." That's that's not what it's like. Um, when it comes to, like, what you experience, in these altered states, specifically with some of these powerful chemicals that are, it's now exotic. I mean, they're out there, and we live in a horrible fucking age for drugs. Like, you don't know what you're getting anymore. It's
I
scary as
advise
shit.
everybody do not touch anything today because it's probably mostly fake. It's probably fentanyl to try to get you hooked.
Or
Tiny amounts of fentanyl, you know, beat the best China White. Back in my day, China White was the king. If you were into fucking China White or you had a connection with China White, you were there.
you're describing, this lost drug culture. Well, it's not lost. I was
No,
trying
they're
to
still
explain
out
to
there, dude. Dude, they're still
uh,
out there. There are people on my account that fucking amaze me. And without going in too deep, literally once a week, I have to say, please don't do me any favors. Don't please. I get it. I love it. And still they'll do me favors. It is not lost, dude. There are some pros out there. And you know what's funny about it is you can always tell. They can tell with me and I can tell with them. And these are younger guys. And I'm like, God damn, you gotta fucking be kidding me. Uh, I can't even, I don't know.
but we were like, offline, we were talking about how hard it is sometimes, at least on my end, when I look back at some of these older school originators of different things, that I'm into, like weaponry, some
Right.
of the drug culture aspects of, like, guerrilla warfare, like all of these things. It's rare and hard to find people that went through that, survived it, and are not fucking assholes or just too into their own head to share or talk about some of these things. I think the rarity that I found in you is that you actually speak about some of these things, and you, like, you don't show everything, which I respect, and I understand why that is.
Well,
But you,
that's a teaching page too, and that's why I call it a hive mind. And a lot of guys get mad at me. They're like, the guy posts shit with no context. Dude, figure it out for yourself. Dig
yeah,
around. That's the idea. I'm not going to show you how to fucking use a clothespin to build a switch. It's common knowledge if you look. And you know what I'm
yeah,
saying? And on and
yeah.
on.
When we're kids and we're looking for, direction, uh, in my on my end, like, I was reading books, reading about this fucking 400-year-old 400-year-old dead samurai, but I was also looking at people around me, examples, people that I wanted to emulate and/or people that I wanted to learn from or follow. Like, what are you looking for in the people that you're building a reputation as far as being somebody to deal with? You're building a
My
reputation as
reputation was bad. It was psychopath.
that was
And
your reputation?
that's not a good thing,
Wh
especially at that
wh
time.
where's that reputation coming from? We haven't talked about where that
Well,
side of your story kind of, like, starts
I had tattoos when I was
manifesting.
13. I figured out how to do stick and poke with India ink, and I
What's
would mix
what
up
was your
weapon.
what was your first tattoo?
It's
Like,
all witchy spells. It's all witchy
it
stuff.
it's occult,
I was not going to
iconography
be
and
the guy
symbolism.
that had Led Zepp on his fucking bicep. No, no, I seen those guys. No, it's all stuff that either I came up with myself or that are based in occultism. Um, to this day, while I'm not a big fan of tattoos, like I mentioned, I don't regret any of the tattoos I have because they still stand with me. They
Yeah.
do.
I
They
mean,
still have meaning to me.
they're all a part of you. I mean, you're here still, so
Even
they're
though
all a
I was
part
a
of you.
13-year-old, freak, idiot, I have
Y
two what you'd call professional tattoos. One was done by a great biker lady, Constance, when I was 16, and it's because I got cut up real bad one night, and I had a big 13-inch scar on my arm, totally opened up. A few people are aware that how skin tears. You've probably seen
Mhm.
this, dude. It's weird how your fat looks and just it was terrible, but I got this big scar, and I came up with the bright idea that it would reduce it if I put a tattoo over it a little bit.
Did
So
it?
no, it just brings the tattoo. It's like this tattoo with this line, big line, this horrible scar. Because by the time I got to the hospital, the doctor was like, "Oh, this is a knife wound," which means they're calling the police, which they did, and he just did a Frankenstein stitch, one continuous stitch. He's like,
Yeah.
He's like, "Dude, there's nothing I can do. It's gonna be a hell of a scar." He's
Fuck.
like, "You're lucky you held it
Y
together."
y you're on your own, you're out of the house, out of
Yeah,
multiple houses, you're
yeah,
moving what you're moving. You say you have an awful reputation.
terrible.
Where is this terrible reputation coming from? Are you ultra violent? Are you not
I was
taking
very violent. And my
what
reputation, I was called a cat killer because at that time, anybody that was a witch killed cats and babies, of course. So they're like, "That's the cat killer. That's the pussy. That's the guy that carries weapons."
is
It
is
was,
is
yeah,
the coward the pussy
coward.
at
Yeah.
is that coming from you pulling out weaponry? Is that it? Like, where is
Well,
this coming from?
the initial pussy thing came from a fight in seventh grade. I was there about, I don't know, a couple weeks. The way my house was located is nobody from my grade school ended up at the junior high I was at. They were all
Yeah.
strangers. So, of course, I'm this island, and islands are always picked on. So some dude was picking on me, and I just tried doing the old mantis thing. I tried removing his eyes, and it just didn't go over well. People are like, "That's fucking pussy shit, man." I'm like, "Didn't I fucking win?" And they're like, "No, you didn't win because that's fucking wrong." I'm like, "It's a fucking fight in the hallway. What's wrong?" And it took me a while because once again, I think I have a damaged brain. I was like, "Fuck, if you just that's what you do, man." And people were like, "No, that's not
Yeah.
what you do."
you're supposed to square up and agree to this
The cuffs,
exchange
the
of
Marquis of Queensberry or whatever, you know?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, but you were like,
Well,
"Fuck no, I'm gonna fucking pluck this motherfucking guy's eye out, fuck
I
it."
tried. It's very hard to do, you know that? But
But
anyway,
I mean, you're the first guy I've met that has actually fucking tried it, so that's fucking you're way ahead.
I tried it. I
Um,
mean, I could have done more pressure, but I was pretty serious enough that the guy was like,
it it ended it, so
yeah,
that's a fucking win. That's a fucking win
yeah.
in my book.
Well, my dad was into Wing Chun and Tang Soo Do and all this stuff when I was a kid. But in about fourth grade, my friend, he got hit in the back with an ice ball by another kid, and I did a throat strike on him. You know, where you do this,
Yeah,
this thing.
yeah,
Fourth grade. Well, that's a serious move. You do it?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got
You
in
can
quite a bit
fracture.
of trouble, and my dad was like, "No more for you. You don't get it." So
Yeah.
I couldn't do that anymore.
So
Yeah,
you have this reputation of basically pulling out all the stops in fights, and that in those days was probably viewed negatively, I
very
imagine.
negative. Very.
Um, but I mean, you're not giving a fuck. You're still trying to keep yourself safe, especially with a reputation like that. I imagine you're being fucked with by some of the elements in that world. W-
By eighth grade, I had adopted the nunchuck thing. So where that comes in is I don't have any experience with brass knuckles. I've never hit anybody with brass knuckles. I've never nothing like that. Nunchucks, yeah, I've immense experience. So I wanted
so
to find a tool that I could carry, that I could get good with, that was exotic, that was flashy, but it was useful. And that's where I centered on the nunchuck thing. And they were
this is
super popular.
this is
Super
before all
popular, dude.
this is before all the bullshit legislation on these.
Yes.
This is like buying them from a magazine. Like, where's the first time you saw them? Was it
My dad.
where your
My dad
dad
from the 60s. I've still
pulled
got
out
his pair. They
how
were called chia
what?
pangs. They're like the flails, they're uneven. One stick's
Okay,
longer than the other. They're hexagon, that's the old school ones. I've still got
those
his pair.
are those the ones that are based on this like for rice, like
Supposedly,
the
yeah,
Okinawa
like
one?
a horse thing or right. You know what? I don't know where it comes from.
Yeah, yeah, like I'm it's like for me, it's just, I'm a nerd when it comes to weaponry, and I collect old weaponry and shit
Right.
like
You
that.
have
So,
the uneven sticks, the long
yeah,
stick
so
and the short.
yeah, yeah.
I always thought that was the rice flail, but he never called them nunchucks. He called them chia pangs.
In Mexico, we call them chacos. Like, everybody has a
Like
fucking
taco
weird ass fucking
sticks,
yeah,
nunchucks.
yeah.
Yeah, everybody
Nunchaku.
had a weird.
So you're picking these up from your dad. Like, I imagine when I picked up my first set of nunchucks, my elbows still remember, and the back of my head still remembers because they're not easy to fucking swing around. I first saw them in fucking Bruce Lee movie, and I was like, man, he's probably utilizing these hardwood sticks. He was not. He was using foam fucking nunchucks, but whatever. I started spinning those things around, and motherfucker, they bit. Um, I think mine were
I never
wood.
had that problem. I have a good spatial awareness of where
Okay,
things are. So I never had that problem with them. I know a lot of people do, and I've seen a lot of people hitting themselves in the head and all this shit. But I learned early on that all that flashy stuff, while it's cool for your girlfriend and stuff to watch and whatnot, that's not how I ever used them. That had nothing
cool.
to do with anything I ever. Compound movements. Simple, straightforward compound movements. That's it.
Where did you get your first chucks? Did you go to a store? Did you
I made
buy
them.
them? Did you make you
Broomsticks.
made them?
Broomsticks and a dog chain and eye hooks.
Eye hooks, broomsticks, and a dog chain. Did you
Yeah.
measure them to the original one your dad had,
No,
or
to
guesstimated?
myself, for myself,
Guesstimate.
my size
Cool.
for
How did you
flipping them back.
how did you measure them for your size? What are you using as a reference?
Flipping
Your
it back,
forearm?
and if I could catch it with my hand.
Oh, that's fucking sweet.
Yeah.
That's some sweet shit. Where are you carrying these fucking things
Down your
on?
sleeve in your leather coat.
So it's like
One stick
down
goes down the sleeve, and then the other one sticks out. That's how everybody carried them. That's nothing I invented. That was a common street thing. Everybody was.
now. Now, we seen these fuckers pull him out and try and fucking do flashy shit and then get decked, or like what are you
Yeah,
seeing?
when they would do flashy stuff, you just step into it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
You know
mean,
how it is, you know, the baseball bats and all that shit. You just
it
fucking step into it. That's why, and you've probably seen it on my page. the little spike on the bottom,
Mhm.
that's where that came from.
It's like a hammer fit. You can hammer fist
So
fuckers
you're
when you
close
smack them.
in and you still got like a Kubaton with your nunchuck. So that's where that came from. And the lead thing came from an altercation one night where it didn't stop the guy fast. And I'm
So
like,
you
uh-oh.
you
Those are, the problem with that with street fighting is the guy that you really lay into and he's like,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
you're like, oh, uh-oh,
yeah.
I'm fucked.
For me, it's, when and this I remember this clearly the first time it happened to me. It's when you see the whites of their eyes, and then they go away, and then they come back up, and you're like, "Fuck, it didn't work."
Yeah, that's bad too. That's bad too.
That's like
I'm one of
that's
the
when
dudes that's hard to knock out. I got hit over the head one night with a 2x2 and it really buckled my legs. And I thought I was going to go, but I didn't. And that speaking of nunchucks, I broke a guy's hand that night. Hopefully everybody's dead and statute of limitations is over. But he pulled a knife on me, and it was fun. It was there's no comedy to this, but it is funny in a way. He pulls this knife, and I broke his hand, and he's like, "You fucking just broke my hand," and I said, "You pulled a knife on
you
me,"
pull a fucking knife on me. What do you
and he's
expect?
like, "Well, fuck off." I'm like, "Oh man, that was." But you see, and we're laughing about it and stuff. But when I look back at that, and I think that's why I have PTSD today and don't sleep well and all these problems, that was bad. This
Yeah,
was
it's
a
costly.
running battle between 6 people, 3 on 3, in the middle of the night in a neighborhood that ended up fucking trashing this girl's house going through it. A broken hand, knife pulled, my head getting busted, multiple lacerations and other stuff. Anybody could have died.
Yeah.
Anybody, when you fuck around like that, at the time I thought it was funny. Looking back on that, what if that guy had died? What if I'd have fucking smacked that guy in the head? We wouldn't be talking here right now. I'd have been fucked.
Like, this something that people don't talk about, and I'll ask you, like, that night, do you this sounds like fucking wild ass night. Uh, that night, you break this guy's hand, you're close to death. I mean, somebody pulling out a knife that you've managed to see it, I mean,
I
that's
thought it was
lucky.
funny. I thought it was
Yeah, all
funny. I
all
thought it was a
all that
joke.
all that shit. For me, the worst part of a night like that is finally being alone with yourself when, like, all that shit ended and you're, like, sitting somewhere and you're like, "Holy shit."
No,
Did you
here's
did
here's what happened. So, luckily, my girlfriend was in the vicinity of her house, and you got to remember we're kids. We're like 15. Okay, this isn't adult stuff. And I called my mom. This is why I got to tell you. I called my mom. 3 a.m. roughly, and I'm like, "Mom, you got to come pick me up because the cops are in the area." There's a big chaos. You don't think people don't call the cops? There's this is, you know what I mean? I got
Yeah,
to
those
get out
people
of there. I can't be on the street walking. You will get picked up. So, you got to try to get out of there. And my mom, she's just like, Billy. That's all. She's like, Billy. And I'm like, get me home. And did I think about it? No, no. I got away with it. And I'm like, yeah. And the dudes, we seen them, later on and stuff, and that's just the way it was. This is how fucking psychotic this shit is, dude. And you hear about this. You've been around the criminal element and stuff. We waited in the rain for 2 hours plus watching these guys at the house for them to leave. They had ripped off a grow house from some people that we knew. And that's what this was about. Dude, you get that in court, everybody's fucking going down.
yeah,
The judge
yeah,
is like, fuck all you assholes. You're all dangerous. You're fucked. And at the time, I didn't realize the seriousness of that stuff. I didn't realize, that's at minimum second degree assault, probably first degree, and other stuff, and that
yeah.
went on and on and on.
You're like, when you're describing these events, I mean, you're in these environments where this shit is common or this shit is happening because you're in the drug trade. You're basically trying to move things in environments and be in these places with some of these people, and this is what happens. Am I mistaken with that?
I just think it was a bunch of assholes, really. I think it was a bunch of young boys that were fucking just a bunch of assholes that were drugged up. Everybody involved in this was a player. I always had a rule: you don't fuck with anybody that's not a player. If you're a player, you're fresh meat. If you're not a player, I never fucked with anybody. There was a famous thing that happened that went through our whole community. There was another team. I didn't know them, but I seen them. They were four dudes, and they had an old fucking 60s Impala, and they used to cruise the mall, and they were these dudes that would go and they would fucking snatch purses. The one guy would jump out of the car, he would grab the purse of the fucking lady at the mall. The malls back then were not enclosed, they were open malls, strip
Yeah.
malls. And they would do these purses. I always felt that was wrong. I'm like, that's fucking wrong. One day he grabbed a purse from this lady who had just happened to be a liked teacher in the community. He grabbed the purse. The snap did not break. She fell back and she hit her head on a cement thing. Oh, you know the rest of the story. She died.
Yeah.
They all fucking went down for murder. And it's not only murder, but it's murder in the commission of a felony, a robbery. They were all fucked, and we're all like, huh, all that shit's off the board. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Any
Yeah. Yeah.
civilian, anything like that. So
Yeah.
that was great. But I knew a burglary team. I knew these guys are 15, 16 years old, dude, when I say this. They were a burglary team that operated, everybody thinks a burglar creeps around at night. They never crept around at night. They operated during the day when everybody's at work. They had connections in the stereo and music businesses. Somebody'd come in and buy a nice, Oberheim keyboard, and he wanted a bag, and he'd say, hey, this guy bought an Oberheim, here's his address, wait 4 months and go and collect the Oberheim. Because at that time, musical equipment and stereo equipment, big money and
Yeah.
easy to
Yeah.
sell at pawn shops. Nobody kept track of shit, you know? People were just starting to inscribe their license number on shit and stuff with tungsten pens and stuff. But yeah, so we were good friends with a burglary team. They had one of the biggest party houses there were. The best times I ever had partying was at that house. Oh,
You 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 start growing in reputation. I mean, you had a horrible reputation, you said, but like you start gathering your own crew. You start working your own line
the
basically.
Coven, witchcraft based.
Okay, you use the phrase coven.
Coven.
Now, am I is this like what type of like explain why this is a coven instead of a crew? Like what's the
So
difference?
even the most ingrained LSD fucking coke shooting 16-year-old would still have problems with us. They'd be like, you're fucking against God. Well, didn't you just shoot up fucking, a gram of coke? Well, yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm like, whatever. But anyway, I'm just saying that these guys, they were very against that. So they're another strike on my reputation. The cat killer. The
Yeah.
guy's a cat killer. I killed my mom. I killed cats. I killed babies. It was all this, and it was just a way to, discredit my reputation. So I started putting together, these were close friends of mine that I had already been involved in. And you got to remember, we were all in this band. We had a band that used to play at Kager's. We were all into fucking, cultic music. That's the core thing here. So it was real easy when I'm like, you know what? Let's start trying some of this stuff. And for a short time, I really bought into it. I really thought that it was real.
What type of magic are you talking about that you were buying into?
At
Like
that
you
time, it would have been like, starting out with basic stuff like Gavin and Yvonne Frost. You ever heard of them? It would be
vaguely.
like very early, what you'd call today Wicca, but
Okay.
very,
Okay.
very early, herbalists type stuff and everything. I used to sew up my own sachets and stuff, the little bags with herbs and stuff in them like that. Kind of started out like that. Then candle magic. And then more like necromancing stuff, black magic, communication with the dead, trying to raise spirits, things like that. We got a hold of the Necronomicon before we found out it was a total bullshit story. You want to talk about some complicated rituals. I don't know if you know anything about black magic. They're so fucking complicated that the whole thing is once you get all the fucking dead hands and shit together and do this ritual, you will be batshit crazy. You probably will
Oh,
be raising a demon.
yeah, like my favorite one is
There you
this
go.
one,
Yeah,
yeah.
the hand of glory.
This is the only one I have. It's a plastic one from Halloween, though. My
Hand of
kid likes
glory.
it. Look,
Dude,
the hand of glory.
we
Uh,
were seriously almost at the point of, yeah, digging that stuff up.
yeah,
Pretty
the
close.
hand. For people that don't know, the hand of glory is. I mean, there's different ways of making it. Apparently, it's supposed to be the
Thief.
pickled hand
Thief's
of a
hand.
condemned. The pickled hand of a thief's a thief's hand. You have
Bad
to be
criminal.
hung,
Murderer.
murderer, condemned. You have to pickle it in his own.
Oh,
Uh, it's
dude,
and
it's
the
so fucking involved that you're batshit crazy when you're done, and then it does work. You
you
are
have to
like
you
it's like
have to
deep.
nail it to the door of a church and stay with it all night.
Jesus. Yeah.
Like all well, it's cool as shit though, like to read
Oh,
about. And again, I'm a nerd about all these things. So and also they actually caught a German thief. I don't know if you if you read about this. I'll send you the article. They caught like in like 2008 or something like that with a pickled fucking hand in a bag. Like it's a high
well,
level
you know
thief.
what? Some people just continue on the life.
But
You know,
still,
I mean,
it's still I'll be like, holy
we
shit.
were this close. We were this close. I really feel a weird kinship to a guy named Ricky Casso. Have you ever heard that name? The
No,
Acid
no.
King.
Okay.
Look it up. He's the guy that basically kicked off the Satanic Panic. He was a young occultist back east. He's dead. He committed suicide and he killed a guy over LSD. Dude, is this starting to sound familiar? There were other people. Dude, you
Yeah.
should look this story up. Everybody's documented it very well. In fact, there's a guy on Instagram that really did a great documentary on him. And a lot of people don't understand how deep this guy was in the occult, but they don't understand what the occult was like at that time, that it was so music based and hallucinogen based. And this guy, really, I mean, once I didn't know about the story back in the day, but 20 years later, I was like, holy shit, I was seconds away from that.
What changed that for you? Like you're basically running a coven. Um, you were really deep into a lot of these things. You're kind of figuring out that some of these fucking things are questionable and or bullshit. I imagine as you're
So when
going
I was
through them.
16, you're getting ready to go into 10th grade, which is high school, roughly. I went to high school for 2 weeks and then I was banned district wide. I couldn't get into any school, including the continuation ones. I called my mom up and I said, I can't get into any school. They won't let me in. And she's like, let me look into it. And she says, apparently you are banned from the entire district. I'm like, that's not even legal. It may have been legal at the time. Today, I'm sure you could challenge it. And basically, it was because my girlfriend had been pregnant. That was a big thing back then, dude. Even my
Yeah.
friends were like, all my friends who are getting their dicks sucked and fucking every night. I'm like, you know what? My girlfriend's pregnant. Her name was Jill. And they're
It'll be
like,
like,
oh shit, dude. Oh
yeah.
fuck. And I said, wait a minute, were you getting your dick sucked every night? Well, maybe not every night. But anyway, I'm like, oh God, I bought into it again. But anyway, uh, I was running the black magic thing. I looked like a witch. I had long hair. I smelt like fucking patchouli and sandalwood and wore a long coat and was just, strung out. And, they're like, basically what the guy told me, the vice principal was, you're not a child and you're among children. You don't belong here. Get the fuck out. And that's what he told me. And I'm like, oh, we'll see about that. But I found out.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was out, and I was married at a young age. I got married when I was 18. My
How
first
was
wife.
how was that? Like, what was Did you just go to courthouse? Was there an event? Did you like fucking
I had just turned 18. I was 17. The girl was a little over 16, and she was what was called an emancipated minor. You ever heard of that?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, she was an emancipated minor. I met her downtown one time. Just to tell you what my mindset was, I met this girl downtown. We're sitting on this bench waiting for the bus, kind of back to back bench, and she's like, "Hey, uh, why do you have a suit on?" That's a whole other thing. You'd think that because I was working, I worked for the city security. That's a whole other side thing. Anyway, I said, oh, I work over at the Opera House sometimes. And she goes, oh, that's a real good job. She says, you know what? I get $452 a month Social Security. You want to move in together? I said, hell yeah. I mean, she was beautiful. I was like, hell yeah. It was literally like that, dude. A week later, we're living together.
Wow.
Yeah. And then a couple months later, she's like, I'm pregnant. And I said, yeah, that's great. That's cool, man. That was that.
Yeah.
And yeah, my daughter's there, and we're just trying to do this thing, and I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, man. But she was nuttier than a fruitcake, obviously. She's dead now. Both my wives are dead. I met the
The
same people.
well, today's Day of the Dead, so it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
fitting that
no,
we're
no,
we'll
I
light a
feel
candle.
bad for my children. Both their mothers are dead, because of my actions, meaning that I met the same kind of person. They're party girls. Party girls never stop. Real party girls never stop until they die. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
They're not good mother material.
W when you're in that process of becoming you're becoming a father, you're married now,
Yeah.
what's your life, what's your
Married
life
and divorced
prerogative?
by 20.
Like, what are you focusing on at this point? Are you still what are you focusing your time on? Like, how are you maintaining this family that you now
So
have?
the occult stuff ended at that time when I was about 18, 18 and a half. We had been involved with another coven that was dangerous.
When you
And
say dangerous, like, what was dangerous about them? I mean,
We're not we're
you
not
guys are not
sure
safe.
if they were trying to murder us one night or whatever because of the amount of whatever. It
Okay.
was a very, very large amount. This was a very unusual group of people that we had met, that we had gotten involved in. I didn't even know other covens existed. I really didn't, and we just stumbled across it by accident. As a side note, we actually had a guy come up, supposedly from the Church of Satan out of San Francisco, that found us because we used to hang out in the parks at night, 2:30 in the morning recruiting. That's how I recruited, in the parks, because a lot of LSD freaks, a lot of dopers, they're in the parks at 2:30 a.m.
Yeah.
It's a good place to recruit. Anyway, he came there to recruit us. My street partner was a very cool guy. His street name was Zydo. He was involved in all this with me, and he was very, very, he did not like him. And
What about his pitch didn't jive with your friend? Church of Satan person.
this Church of Satan guy comes up. He's like 20 years old. We're 16, 17 roughly. And he comes up on a bicycle, and he's got a 40-ounce torpedo on the back of Old English. I don't even know if they still make that. And he finds us in a park, and he's like, hey, he did have a cool ring. That was the only thing that made me even talk to him. He had
What was the ring like?
it was some type of an unusual goat's head that was custom. It wasn't a standardized biker ring. Anyway, he comes up and he's like, I've heard about you. And my friend's like, what the fuck have you heard? He's like, yeah, my
Yeah.
friend's unusual. And he's like, well, I've just heard some good things, and we'd like to meet you and stuff like that. And my friend instantly pulls out the pipe, and he's like, you need to smoke this, you fucking cop.
Yeah.
And he goes, I don't smoke marijuana, but I will touch it to my lips. He literally said that. And my friend was like, yeah, this guy. Nah,
Yeah. I get it.
nah, nah.
I get it.
And I talked to him, and he did have a lot of occult knowledge, and he had a cool ring. I tried to get it from him. I said, dude, give me that ring, and I'll listen more. He said, I can't give you the ring. He said, I can talk to you and stuff, and everything. And he talked about using Dungeons and Dragons as a recruitment tool. That, and I know you've heard of Dungeons and Dragons,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that was a big thing back in the day where the Christians were down on that, and that was a recruitment tool. I did ask people that. I use that myself. I'm like, hey, you ever do Dungeons and Dragons? Oh yeah. You want to try it for real? It just was
Is
a
that it
short step.
yeah. Is that what they were is that how they used it? Is it like,
It
"Hey,
was just a
th"
game, but how I
yeah, yeah.
used it and how this guy was using it was, you already are introduced to the occult. You already
Yeah.
have a general idea what it is because it is an occult-based game.
Yeah, you're already utilizing your mind to envision and or manifest or, like, just do
Exactly, exactly.
so
Right. And a lot of people that played Dungeons and Dragons were kind of weird. They were weirdos back then. We considered them. We're like, did you play it?
yeah, a little bit.
There you go. See what I'm saying? I rest my case.
Uh, your Coven ends, this what's the evolution of that now? Like, with you, like, what are you doing
My
after
friend
after
quit. My street partner Zydo, he quit. He's like, I'm fucking out. I got a wife at home. The baby's on the way. The baby hadn't got there yet. I'm a mess. I'm a mess. My friend's a mess. He's like, I need to fucking get off the train. He's 18 and he's done. He moved
he's
in with
burned
some
out?
21-year-old chick, and
Yeah,
which was good for him. Dude, we had been on the train for so long.
yeah. What are you doing now then? Like, what's your evolution after that?
I was
what do
working
you
for the city security. I was selling marijuana and pills, and I was just kind of doing that. And
yeah,
I was just thinking, God, I really need to up my game. I was thinking I need to fucking up my game. And that's when I met the chemist guy, the LSD guy, and got serious
okay,
into the LSD thing even more. Started making some money, bought a Trans Am, wanted to get more into the game. This is when I'm moving into my 20s.
yeah.
And that's when I got into growing. And a lot of that had to do with that lady I mentioned.
Yeah, yeah,
She
yeah,
was
this
one of
wealth of
the
knowledge.
original growers under fluorescence aquarium lamps. Very advanced in the 70s, dude. It sounds crude today, but I'll tell you what, if you know the evolution of it. And she's the first person that said, hey, the new thing, high pressure sodium, metal halide. I'm like, what is this witchcraft? She's
Yeah,
like, it's going to be hard to get because they watched all that stuff very closely at that time. She said, be very careful. But she explained to me how the ballasts work. I don't know if you know how that lighting works. The
what's
ballast that light the high pressure sodium lights and the metal halides, grow lights.
yeah, yeah, grow lights,
You had
yeah.
to build your own shit then, dude. It's a
What
capacitor and a transformer. We used to call them bare bones. You had to build your own stuff. You had to build your own hoods and you had to steal the lights because all the supply houses were DEA stings. There was either a dude that was supplying information back to the DEA or whatever. So if you're buying those kind of light bulbs in, you were a big player. And that's how they kept track of it. And I got to thank my dad for telling me that.
so you start getting into growing,
Big time.
like, this, like, what basically what years is this? This is,
This is the mid 80s. This is the mid
uh
80s.
are you how are you getting around people watching for this? Is it sourcing them from different, hobbyist, type of places? Is it how are you
You
figuring
talking
out how to?
about the building the lights?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like,
The lights, basically, the ballast is a transformer and a capacitor. You could get
yeah,
those from supply houses. No problem to get those parts. It was the bulbs that were the problem.
yeah,
The bulbs are the problem. Steal them. Street lights.
street lights, yeah.
A lot of
Yep,
the early stuff was stolen from street lights. People would bring me stuff and I'm like, this is a fucking mercury vapor, dude. This isn't what I was talking about. You'd get stuff like that. Those are those kind of yellow lights and stuff.
yeah, yeah,
Steal them from commercial buildings, street lights, stuff like that. It's stolen stuff. Nobody went to the grow places. You were guaranteed to get busted. And that's
yeah,
where I hooked up back with the guitarist in our band. He's dead now. He blew his brains out quite a few years ago. Probably, I don't even know how long, 15, 20 maybe. But him and me got into big time commercial growing. I think I mentioned to you one time, I figured out because smell was a big problem.
yeah,
Smell and
yeah.
light
I
leaks.
mean,
I started venting into the city sewers. We would be in the basement of the place and there was all these clean outs for the sewers.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you ever seen how they, I don't know if in your area they even have them, but these
In
twin
Mexico,
out
not so much, but I've seen them
right.
in, like, places like Cleveland. We use some pretty old buildings, and they
Yeah, the
have these.
pipe comes down and then there's a kind of
Yeah.
little Y. So we would vent in there. We would seal everything up good and stuff. And that's when we first started getting into night vision stuff and looking for light leaks and all that stuff and stealing power and everything. Because at that time, and it
If you
wasn't DEA. The DEA was not your enemy. Your enemy was the sheriff's narcotics units, because until you got to a certain level, the DEA didn't give a fuck about some guy growing 5 plants in a basement. They
yeah,
were
but the
looking for
sheriffs.
99 plants and above.
So you're talking really fast, and that's great. I'm just, but you were utilizing the first night visions devices you were utilizing to see if you had any light leaks at your grow.
You couldn't buy night vision devices easily. They had to be made. There was a place, and I don't even know if it's still around. There was 2 places, and you can look these up. Meredith Electronics and Information Unlimited. Dude, we got some cool shit out of those places. Military grade stuff. These were
Yeah.
clearinghouses for military tech, like old Vietnam tech, which wasn't as bad as you may have thought. It wasn't great, but it wasn't, by today's standards, but there were some good tubes and stuff from Vietnam era.
So you would
Anyways, these
basically you
places,
would
and you
want.
couldn't sell them. You couldn't sell them. It was illegal, even at that time. They were all disassembled. You had to know how to put them back together, and they were usually missing parts. So we would build that stuff.
Wild. Where the fuck were you in figure? So you were just tinkering with these things. I mean, I
No,
can't
so what
imagine you
that
were do.
happened in 7th grade when I met this crew that I hooked up with, that I worked for. We worked together for years. It's the guy that introduced me to the guy that was on the internet and stuff. All of it came out of basically one simple thing. They were all some type of musician. And the one guy started building distortion units. Jimi Hendrix's distortion unit is a famous, semi easy to build box. And it was a famous unit built back then. And these guys were they were etching their own boards and stuff in 7th grade. They were
Wow.
doing their own boards, You had to do all this stuff custom. And I'm like, hey man, I said, that is fucking super cool. Look at this spike pen. Look at this pen gun. And they're like, you know what? We can all work together, can't we? And I'm like, yeah, you want a pill? Oh, we don't fucking take pills. We smoke marijuana. That was a great time. And I'm like, try a pill, a pharmaceutical, a legend drug. And they're like,
Yeah.
nah, you try a hit of weed. I said, I don't touch that shit. That's hippie shit. I would touch it. And one day we merged. They tried this, somebody tried this, and it was we were all together. There was 5 main people in it. And we got along very well. I mean, and we all had specialties. And like I said, the one guy's dead. The one guy turned schizophrenic. The other guy had an affair with my first wife, so he was out, which was very risky.
Yeah. That's
Very
murder
risky.
shit. That's something you can murder somebody over. Yeah. I understand what you
Yeah,
mean,
but
risky.
but the problem was is both my wife and him bought into the character more than they should have, because they did. She thought I would kill him, and all
Mm.
I thought was, I'll bet I can get his fucking stereo out of him, because I actually liked him more than my wife. Meaning that I had, he was a good friend of mine. We had been through some everything. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? The bro thing. Bros
Yeah.
before hoes. I hate to say that, but
Yeah. You're talking you're talking about you were only worried about the sheriff's department back
yeah,
then, like the narcotics units and shit like
yeah.
that. Are you is there like this is the eighth, so I don't know what anything was like back then. Were there rip-off crews? Were there people trying to figure out where you were fucking growing your shit? Are you
Yeah,
worried about
yeah.
security?
There was always rip-off crews. There was a famous court case in our area where 2 dudes, this is prior to me, but it was a close friend of my street partner. His brothers captured a guy, stripped him naked, duct taped him up, and threw him in the river. And it's just amazing that the guy didn't die. But it was considered attempted murder, which is what it was, in a drug thing. And he had ripped off an early grow house. This was about 79.
Shit.
So yeah, that stuff was going on. But how I avoided all that stuff was a very simple thing. I figured out early on that the biggest enemies to the whole situation was girlfriends and wives. I'm like, there are no girlfriends allowed. There are no wives. And if you can't agree to any of this, get the fuck out of the whole thing, because those were the leaks. That was the problem.
How did you enforce that? Like, don't no girlfriends, no wives need to know
No,
about any of this shit.
no,
OPSEC.
no. And keep everything separate. The main guy that I worked with, I met him in the late 80s, and I worked with him until he got a dime. He had what was called a Bible. That was a large amount of LSD. You can look it up. It's a very large amount, and he crossed interstate transport of LSD. He was looking at life. He was looking at life, and luckily he was smart and he had a good attorney and stuff. And the lowest they could get was 10 years. He had so much. He was set up by I never trusted them fucking prospects from biker gangs. Full patch members, yeah. Prospects, hangers on, support crew, it's the
Yeah,
cops. And I can't believe he fell for it. But anyway, I worked with him for absolutely one of the most amazing people I ever worked with. Totally nonviolent. I'm like, dude, you need a gun? He's like, I don't want no guns, man. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, if something goes down, they take it all. He goes, I don't care. I don't care what they take. They can have everything. He
yeah,
he had some good philosophies and stuff. He was a smart guy. And when you're really not psychotic and real fair, you don't make a lot of enemies. He was liked. I liked him. People liked him. They're like, that dude's fucking straight up. You know what I mean? He
yeah,
pays good. He don't rip you off. He's cool. So you build allies. I would have stood up for him. Anyway, once I met him, I was able to really. I didn't work. I never worked a job from the late 80s till 2008. I'll
it
never
was
be
it,
able to collect Social Security though. I won't, dude. That's
well,
dude. I'll never. I fucked with my number so much and everything and my birth date and everything that I think I mentioned to you one time about coming down to your studio, and I said I'm on the no fly, dude. If I there's no way they would
yeah,
be like, it's I fucked it up, dude. I
yeah.
fucked up everything. It's
It's
done.
but you know, there's sacrifices to be made, I guess. Um,
Well, I learned
the
another thing, and I'll tell you one mistake, and I seen him on your thing. The guy that made the fortune, millions of dollars, and lost it all to the DEA. Remember that
Yeah,
guy? You know
yep,
why he did that? And I learned this early on. Dude, I was never interested in making millions of dollars. That gets you caught every time. You're getting on so much radar. People, number one, people get jealous. They get fucking weird and they'll fucking turn you in. And didn't his girlfriend turn him in, by the way?
yeah,
Anyway, you got to be careful about all that stuff. So I was only interested in living a comfortable life, not an exorbitant life. I didn't want to bring the heat down on me. Whenever I was actually doing a delivery or anything serious, I drove a Citation. Do you know what a Citation is?
yeah. I know what a
It's the most
citation is. Yeah,
anemic fucking car. Everybody had one at that time and they're just nothing. I never wore jewelry. I never wore anything. I put my driver's license and my attorney's phone number in my shoe, and I never wore anything when I was actively selling stuff, large amounts, because I always had this theory I'm going in like I came out, meaning like, well, I was birthed naked, basically. That's how I'm
yeah.
going in. No watch, nothing, nothing, man. Now, when I wasn't working, I dressed like a fucking pimp. I tried to live the life. I acted the fool, man.
When you say you acted the fool, I mean that was your pleasure, though. Like for everybody, there's like a pleasure. For you, your pleasure was the
Trans Ams, gold chains, diamond watch, perfume. I used to wear Jovan Musk. I just like the way it smelled.
Phew.
Yeah, there you go. There's an oldie, huh? And yeah, and I just kind of played that role because that's what I thought a dope dealer was. You know what I mean?
Are when you're going through the, I mean, you're talking about living like this all the way to the 2000s. So are
2008.
you seeing the change of legislation and these, are you like this whole legalization, are you seeing hints of it as you're still on your day job, this job? Like
Yeah.
what
So in
does that
about
look,
two
what does that look like?
2006, roughly, when I went to that guy that I told you that was the big dealer. He'd gotten out of prison, and of course, he went right back to his life because that's all he ever knew. Anyway, I went to him one time, and I said, "I've got this amount. Just, you want it?" And he said, "Dude, unless you can come up with 10 pounds in the future," he goes, "there's nothing I can do." He goes, "The legislation, it's coming." He goes, and everybody's smuggling it from states that had already legalized it. And he goes, "It's
Yeah.
washing in." He goes, "It's gonna take 10 pounds." I'm like, 10 pounds. I'm like,
Holy shit.
I guess I'm out. I said,
Yeah.
he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "It's done. It's
Yeah.
done." And I met a lot of people don't know this. I think I mentioned it to you. My girlfriend's, I don't know what you say, Latino, Mexican, whatever, but, and she's a straight arrow.
Yeah.
And she didn't even know I was growing in 2008. And if she had known, I probably wouldn't have, it took me many years to tell her the truth. And she wasn't too happy because I did lie. Well, I lied by omission, but I was still, kind of doing that and stuff. But she's a straight arrow. She's like, you know, I said, "Well, what if you'd known about this back in the day?" She said, "I have nothing to do with you." Nothing.
So you're approaching this end date for this lifestyle that you
Yeah.
have. This change of legislation. I was around for some of that,
Yeah.
and I remember. I mean, just I remember people who were really making a shit ton of money. All of a sudden, that dried up, and then they had to
Yep.
relearn or repurpose their skill set into other things, and usually that led to them fucking dying or going to
Well,
prison.
two major things happened is, the legislation was coming and, Billy's mom died. And, basically, uh, it's kind of unknown about that. She was involved with, I don't wanna mention cartel, but she was involved with Mexican ice dealers, and at that time, where that stuff was coming from, and she was a heavy user. She came to me one time, and it was unbelievable. She's like, "I think I spent $10,000 this month on crack." I'm like, "You fucking smoke? What? That's not even possible." She's like,
Yeah.
"I think I got a problem."
Yep.
Like, "Yeah, you got a problem, man."
Yeah.
That's
Fucking problem.
I don't know what the fuck to do. Yeah, she was heavy, heavy user, but you'd never
You have
fucking know it. She's one of these people that was like, I don't wanna
high
say she was
functioning.
functional, but she was functional.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. You have the responsibility of your kid now. It's
Yep.
big, but he's a kid. Uh, Sounds familiar. I went through kind of
Well,
the
he's
same shit.
he's he's approaching your age. Well, my daughter's your age, and he's
Yeah.
he's getting there.
So
Yeah.
you have this now. You're it for him,
Yeah.
and this business is, you
Correct.
know, but you have this passion for things, for
Yeah.
objects,
Well, I still
for
grow today. You've probably seen that on my page.
yeah.
Yeah,
I see it, and also like for people that might not know this about me, I smoke weed every now and then. But people might not know that. But it's for me, it's like I used to burn acres of it. Now I just put
are
it
you
away.
ready for a big shock? I
Sure,
don't.
sure.
I don't,
I,
never have.
I get it. Some people just there's some people that should not have
Here's
it
what
because
my street partner told me this, because I have been at every level of everything with that guy. And I said, "What the fuck, the dope thing?" He goes, "You never liked," when I say dope, I mean weed, marijuana.
yeah,
He said, "You know what it is?" He says, "You don't like the rapid onset of anything." He goes, "It's too," and I'm like, "You're a fucking genius, man." I said, didn't even know that about myself." He says, "No, you do not like rapid onset." He said, "You want that slow." And I'm
yeah,
like, "I think
no,
you're right." Because weed and me, ugh.
yeah, no. I'm the
Mm,
other way around. I'll like for
boom.
me like with alcohol. It
Yeah.
was like everybody was like
You
ordering
ever,
like
you ever hot knife?
what's a hot knife? I don't know what hot knife is.
Hot knife is an old school way that you can take a huge fucking hit of the best shit, and it might fish trip you. You ever heard of that? Fish trip you, where it knocks you out. You start having a seizure from marijuana.
I've never had a seizure from marijuana. No,
Hot knife
so
it. So hot
okay,
knifing is you take a good man-sized hit, and you got two knives and you put them on the stove, you know, the old school burners, and you heat up
Yeah.
two butter knives till they're hot, and you got a toilet paper tube in your mouth, unless you're a pro, but I recommend the toilet paper tube. And you get them red hot, you tap it to the piece of weed, it'll pick it right up. You smash it together and breathe it in, you'll get fucking the biggest rush of your life. You'll be like, whoa, is that really marijuana? But I will
So
tell you this, blonde Lebanese hash, yo, yeah,
like,
incense to me.
your life is changed. Your life is about to change with everything happening around
Yeah,
you. Like we're getting to this part where you transform
yeah.
in a lot of ways. You know,
Billy Trident.
this concept of Billy Trident. It's a
Yeah,
concept. Like I guess I've seen you change it. Not change it. Like you said, like you are more open than you were like a
yeah,
few years back, as far as
yeah.
allowing yourself to explain some things that are on there or sharing some gold knowledge that a lot of people gatekeep like motherfuckers. Um, w- w- how does that materialize? Like, are you just like,
My
you know what?
son, my son, his mother's gone. This is a
Yeah.
fairly young boy, and he's not a child, but he's a young man. His mother's gone, and under weird circumstances, and he knew his mother was, like he says himself. I realized my mother was a wild person, and I'm like, fuck, man. And I said, I'll tell you what. I mean, I'm just pulling anything out. I said, you can move into this house. I had a house. And I said, you never have to worry about paying rent or doing anything as long as you keep forward motion. I'm grabbing at anything. I'm like, you know, go get a good job, go to school. And he goes, I think I want to go to school. And I said, go to college, man. I said,
Yeah.
we'll pay for it. And he went and he got his AA, and he says, I think I want to go and get a degree in mechanical engineering, um, a master's degree. I said, that's an expensive degree in mechanical
Mhm.
engineering. I said, do you think that we can do this and this? And I started pulling on old stuff when I was in the 80s. Shit that I don't know if you ever heard me say this. I used to go to this wrecking yard and get metal and file on it to try to get away from everybody. There was nobody at this wrecking yard that I knew. There was nobody that knew I went there. And I would just go in there with a file and some metal, and these dudes just thought I was crazy and just start filing away on keys and shit. That's where that key thing came from, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
the punch thing. And I filed that out of a Fiero magnesium backplate. And I started drawing on all this old stuff. And I'm like, do you think we can do this? Can we start casting and stuff? And Billy's real sharp. And he started just picking it up. And then he goes and gets his degree. And we financed it through Billy Trident. He got his degree. And the thing that was funny about it is I told him, as long as you're in forward motion, I said, you never have to pay rent. I said, do you realize you're the only person I've ever met that's never paid rent in their entire life? He never has. He's always been in forward motion. He's always learning something new. That's how we're always coming up with this new stuff. He's
Yeah. Yeah.
always there, man. I'm like, let's do this. Can we do this? And he said, man, that's fucking weird stuff, man. I said, yeah, but can we do it? And he goes, yeah, we can do it. You know, your rattle, the rattle toy.
Yeah. So that's what I'm going to ask you. Like, we talk a lot online, offline, basically
Yes.
on chats and stuff. Like like every now and then I'm like, look, like I find something, like, hey,
Right,
what the fuck is this?
right.
And like, can you make that somehow, or I don't know. Like, I remember one of the first things that I saw on your website, which is gone now. I don't know if it's still up or not, but was this square aluminum uh, auto spike that would come in and out, and I
Yeah,
was like, "Oh, I need
prototype.
that. I need that in my life." I didn't have any cash back then, but I was trying to figure it out. But like you, not only research and tinker like historical objects and nefarious objects of all kinds, but you prototype them, and if it doesn't exist, you fucking make it exist. You manifest this shit.
So
Like,
that comes out of, I don't know if you had these in Mexico. You probably didn't, but you may have heard of them from other law enforcement people. Officer safety bulletins. Did you ever get
yeah,
those?
Yeah, like, hey, watch out for like pen guns were but have always been big in Mexico.
Watch
Like
out
you're
for pen guns. Watch out for this technique. Watch out for this. Well, when I was a kid, I used to go through my dad's officer safety bulletins, and I'm like, the first thing I ever built was a spoke gun. I was probably 6 years old. I'm like, I need one of those. And then I started seeing stuff like air gauge guns, like the air
yeah, yeah,
tester.
yeah, yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
like, oh, you know what? The only way you get one of those is you make one. You don't, that stuff you don't buy. That stuff was mostly late 60s, early 70s biker stuff. That's what
yeah,
they used. They had all kinds of weird stuff like that they were into. And they would get these, they would bust a guy, and he would have like an air gauge knife or gun. The air gauge knives are still listed under the California Penal Code, by the way, which is interesting because there were so many of those guys at that time that got busted that they put them in the penal code.
yeah.
Most people don't even know what an air gauge knife is or have ever seen them. It's kind of like a Guardfather, but built into an air gauge. But yeah, I had to build that stuff.
So you were a lot again. You mentioned the nunchaku that you built, the loaded,
Yeah,
the modifying it to be able to hammer fist fuckers with it if they got
yeah,
too close.
yeah.
So your head was always on this. Let's figure out how to construct things that may not exist, or better things that do exist, and just make them actually functional because
Right,
you had that history of violence behind you. So
right.
that's something you were utilizing as software for this hardware you're building. Now, when you're every now and then you post these mind-blowing objects of history, these
A,
absurd
AOW stuff.
yeah, like that, or like were you collecting for the time that you were active?
So
Did you have an eye or a foresight that, "Hey, this shit is cool and it's probably gonna be illegal and you're not gonna be able to get it?" Like,
so
what
I wasn't just out there in the street selling dope. That's a small thing. Even when you're growing, you're not watching the plants grow, although sometimes I did. But there's time. So I did gun shows all the time. I went to the SOF conventions, dude, in Arizona and fucking Las Vegas when I was a kid. You want to meet some goofballs because you got to remember at the time I come out of the late 70s, early 80s, a lot of them Vietnam guys were
fresh.
30. And they were, I'm going to tell you what, you want to meet a crew? Weirdos in a good way,
Yeah.
where you're literally like, hey, you need a grenade, son? You need a baseball? Well, yeah, check it out. Fuck. I mean, those guys were interesting. And so, yeah, I met a lot of this stuff at gun shows. I sat next to a lot of interesting guys. I sat next to Dr. Bruner, who wrote the book on the OSS, the truth about the OSS. Everybody thinks all these spikes and all this stuff. If you've never read Dr. Bruner's books, amazing guy. I sat next to a guy who had a Schiffner's Military Museum, which was a great cover for his private collection. And he was a guy that told me, that guy, he's like, after World War II's, they brought all the grease guns in and they had them on top of the trains. And he goes, if you were cool enough and you could bypass the special agent, the railroad dick, he said, you get up there and throw a couple of grease guns off. I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, I still got them in my collection. He goes, I'll bring it in tomorrow. Yeah, all that shit, man. Them guide lamp liberators and all that shit. Because after the war, they just scrapped all that shit.
Yeah.
And they didn't let you fucking rifle through it, but they transported them on rail cars. There was shitloads of that stuff that was still here that they never shipped over. That's where it came from. So he was like, yeah, he goes, I'll buy M2s and all that shit was. Nobody gave a shit.
Yeah.
Nobody even wanted it. They didn't even want it.
You're I mean, that's an amazing university of the dark arts that you were going through with some amazing teachers who were, not only there for some of the usage, but also collecting historical information around them. It's like you're basically getting this is the university you're going to for some of the stuff that later on you're about to delve into. Now, for a lot of people, you're known specifically, and I know you do much more than this. And like I am one of your biggest fans with the amount of knowledge and how varied it is. But you're known specifically for Knuckles,
Right.
and I don't know what about them specifically and why that became kind
I
of like
I like
centric.
rings. You'll see a lot of rings. The shape.
Yeah,
I like rings. That comes out of the biker culture. Those guys all wore rings. The old Mexican biker rings. You're certainly familiar with those.
yeah.
Uh,
Tijuana has a that's like the jewelers we have in Tijuana. That's all they made. Biker
they're
ring.
they're fucking great. People criticize that stuff. I got a huge collection of that stuff. Those guys were great because they did it with nothing.
Yep.
I got a tin can and a fucking match, and I just built you this bracelet. Try
Yeah.
American jewelers can't compare. You know, maybe dudes in Thailand, that's about it. But
Yeah.
the Mexican artists are unfucking believable in their skill. And so I like rings, and I got my first pair of knuckles. I asked my dad, I was about 7. I said, "Hey, will you order me a pair of knuckles?" I couldn't afford brass. I scraped together $5 for my paper route or something, and he's like, "Oh, I'll get you some aluminum ones." So I got those, and they were huge. They were those '70s ones, and I don't know. I put them on a chain once in a while to try to intimidate people and stuff. But even at that time, people were like, "Ah, that's just pussy stuff, man. Nobody
Yeah.
fucking uses knuckles." And I never used them. Like I said, never, not once.
Yeah. But they later on in life, you're now have the ability and the means to revisit that and
Yeah, make
make
all
it
the things that were in my head.
so. So I did use knuckles because I was working in a horrible unsupervised environment.
I think
But
they're incredibly dangerous.
they I mean, if you don't know what you're doing with them, I mean, for me it was softening people. You know, if you're gonna soften somebody and you need to hit them in the hands and hit them in the knee or hit them like, but if you crack somebody square in the face with those, that's mutilation level damage you're gonna do on somebody, and you're fucked. No matter who you are or where you are. I mean, unless this is gonna be something that nobody's gonna find out about ever, you know, like that type of shit. But like but also the knuckles that I would grab were mostly bought in TJ at the where they would sell the touristy shit. Most of them were probably fucking made somewhere in China. Every now and then you would find something that somebody would cast somewhere and you could tell, but they were all fucking either they didn't fit your hand, either they would fuck up your fingers because they were too sharp and didn't nobody did a good job filing them.
Right.
Um,
Very common.
or or they were too big or too small, like a bunch of shit. Or the geometry on them was just, you know, not
So this guy
appropriate.
that I told you, Schiffner, the guy with the military museum, he's the first guy that ever told me about pros and knockers. And he said, now he was an old guy in the 80s. He's long passed away now. And he told me about when he was back in New York and how the collectors would use pros and knockers, which a pro was a cutting knuckle and it was used for maiming. A lot of people think, oh, these guys, you don't pay your bill, they kill you. That's not true. If you kill the guy, you're never getting your fucking money, but they will fuck you up.
The
And the
market.
pros were used to cut to create scars, and the knockers were used to break bones. So there was a heavy and a light knuckle. But he said he rarely encountered those. He said, it was just mostly, the sledgehammer, whatever was handy. There was very few guys that specifically had a pen gun in their pocket and a pair of knuckles, kind of a fancy person that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Because you don't want to get busted with that shit.
yeah,
That's
uh,
one of the
uh,
bigger things that a lot of people didn't think about. I couldn't have knuckles in my pocket. I wouldn't get busted with those. You could get charged with that,
yeah,
you know. Nunchucks prior to the city ordinance that was passed in the early 80s in the city I was in, mostly probably due to us flipping them downtown on cruising nights, along with butterfly knives. That stuff was, the cops would just take it.
yeah.
They'd be like, give it to me. And you always give it to the cop. It's only the fool that argues. He's like, give me that fucking knife. Here you go. Add it to your collection.
You start getting to work in creating these. I mean, a lot of them. Again, we were talking about this rattle. I sent you this concept of like a rattlesnake rattle encased in something that could make it like a metal something that could make it rattle. And you took something that was, I think it was this video of this random thing,
Yeah.
and you built it.
Billy
differently,
Billy
but
built
better.
it based
Yeah,
upon that video and a couple of inputs from me.
yeah.
Billy is a real master's degreed mechanical engineer.
I
That's
mean,
intelligent.
mind blowing how that like in the span of a few weeks, it was like, look at this, and now you just sent me this video of it like functioning and everything. Like, holy shit!
So a lot of
N-
people aren't aware of it, but we basically operate at about 20% of what we could. So we could do way more, and that gives us a lot of headroom. We don't just, you know, you know what I'm saying? So
you
our
don't.
level of manufacturing and what we do in our jewelry grade stuff is only at 20% of what we could. Occasionally you'll see it go up to 25, but no, we don't push it at all.
Yeah,
Billy's a master rapid prototyper.
what I see and what I see in the work you're doing is one, a lot of it is original craft. Like a lot of it is coming straight from you. And from some of your experiences and some of the people you probably talk to, but like a lot of it is you manifesting some of these
Right,
objects that
right.
I've never
So
seen,
a
and
lot
I've
of the art stuff that you see, the freaky shit, that just comes from art that I did in the past. So I like breasts. You'll see a lot of breasts and a lot of freaky, mythological female figures. That's just
yeah.
that's just art that I've always drawn. That's where that comes from.
Where does the? I mean, I have a fifth days from you,
Right.
and without the shadow of a doubt, like that's the nastiest object that I own. I got it's what like it's there's a lot of shit that I would rather hit me
My
with than that.
grandfather, his dad, who came over from Sicily, which by the way, I've looked at the Ellis Island log. He had $2,500 on him in 1901. Think about that. Do you know what that means? I've asked other people that, and if they know, I'm surprised that they even let him through. And he worked for the railroad. No, dude, he
Okay.
didn't work for the railroad. Anyway, he had one of those knuckles that he made here in a foundry. I guess he did work in a foundry. He worked in Diamond Foundry and later at the Great Northern Railroad in the foundry. And but I don't know about the money or what was actually going on. And I mean, he was long gone before I got here. My grandfather was interesting. He was a cool guy. I knew him, but I don't know what he was doing. I can tell you that he was from Sicily and he had $2,500 in 1901, and that sounds very criminal. I'm sure he
And
had to really shell out some money for
uh,
bribes to get through.
yeah, that's whenever you see an amount like that, it's usually half or that's 30% of what was
50
left, I guess.
cents.
You said that he made something in a foundry that
Yeah.
resembled this the fifth days or
No, very, very close. Yeah, it had that projection coming off it. It's an old
yeah,
school style. I still got it. I've got it. I inherited it. And I've
that
got the
is
one that was cast in the Great Northern Foundry that's brass that my grandfather had in World War II.
yeah the the amount of types of brass of dusters you're making, knuckles, uh,
Hundreds, hundreds.
pointed objects. Concealed, I mean, I have a few of your people don't know what they are, these aluminum or cast fingers with a point on them,
Well, you know that comes from you, though.
how so?
That comes from you. I thought you knew that. I told you that before. The fingers are
Oh,
directly from you because you posted, when, 20 years ago, that little zombie nub. And you said this could have potential. And
yeah,
somehow Turner got a hold of those and he contacted me and he said, what could you do with these? And then we just designed the finger from there. And I said, well, it's a dulo stick, obviously.
that was a
That was you.
that was me, apparently, fuck, okay, that's
Do you
callback.
remember that post?
Yeah, it was a plastic
Yes.
it was a resin
Yes.
zombie finger that I
Yes.
bought.
Nub. It was
Yeah,
like half.
and you would buy it, and I drilled a hole in it and sharpened the tip on the nail because I'm a fucking asshole,
There you
and I just
go.
put it on my keys.
And posted
Oh,
it. On
I
Blade
didn't
forums. I wonder if that post is still there.
I didn't make that
You
connection, but
see how the
that's fucking
universe
cool.
just goes in a circle?
Yeah, yeah. The the
It's
the
because
the
we're in the same pool. You're just like the king now. You have become the king of the EDC world. Now, there are companies like Microtech that are more famous and stuff, but if you distill down the EDC world, I really honestly, and I'm not just stroking you, I'm saying I don't think that anybody is matched to your level. You're out there training, you're pushing this weird stuff, you got contracts with Emerson, you're doing all this stuff. Can you name anybody else that's doing that? I can't.
uh, I'm Mexican Forrest Gump. I'm just running, I don't know, like, I'm just doing this forward.
Yeah,
Um,
you did it.
but
You did
also
it.
I'm a
And
fan,
people will say it was Rogan, but I disagree with that. I think that all Rogan did for you was maybe jump you ahead a little bit faster, give you a really good blow to your sales. Because I think you would have ended up where you are now, regardless of Rogan. I think that was your path you were on.
I'm a fan of stuff. And also I'm an eternal student. I like you my interactions with you, and, like, there's a lot of people that hate me. There's a lot of people that don't like you, and we've had interactions where we talk about some of these things, and I
Well,
could tell
dude, if
you
you're
without
not disliked, then you're
that
doing something. There's just
I know, but,
that's
like,
human culture.
people that know me know that I'm a nerd out on shit, I nerd out on EDC items, I nerd out on
Yeah.
stuff. I had a job that was pretty cool that I could do a lot of shit that most people are never gonna be able to do, and that gave me some weird life experience, but realistically, I'm still a kid. When I see something at a store or go to Blade Show and see shit like that, but some of the stuff that I see on your Instagram account, that's what I'm like, "Holy shit," right?
Dude, I'm the same way, and I think that a lot of people are going to really, key into this. They're the same way. There's not a lot of females that are. They try to get into it, but for some reason, estrogen just doesn't match with testosterone as far as that weird fascination. Dude, let me tell you how deep it got with me, and I still got it to this day. I really believed that to be a proper dope dealer, I needed a black leather briefcase that I would open up and the dope would be in it. I did
Yeah,
that
yeah,
for a
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah,
hey, that's how it's done.
yeah,
That's movie and TV shit, but I had to bring that to life. Guys would be like, "What's with the fucking suitcase?" I'm like, "It's a briefcase." And and I think it came out of, you ever watch Taxi Driver? Easy Andy?
yeah, 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 yeah,
Dude,
yeah.
that fucking right there. I wanted to be Easy Andy. I just distilled all this shit. I wanted to open up a suitcase and say, here's some fucking Berettas with a suppressor. Here's some fucking dope. Here's this and that. What do you need, man?
For
You're
for me,
fucking weird. Get the fuck out of here. I wanted an ounce of dope. That's it.
for me, it was Ghost Dog. When I was a kid watching Ghost Dog, Forrest Whitaker being this, assassin that would read from the Hagakure, that shit was like, "Holy shit, now this is I need to figure out how to get there, I guess."
Day of the Jackal.
Day of the Jackal was
Day
fucking
of the
fire.
Jackal, and are you ready for this? And I use this my whole life, and you're going to think, what the fuck? When I seen this, I thought it was such fucking genius. Willy Wonka, when he comes out with the cane and he feigns the injury.
Yeah, he's like,
Dude, but that whole thing, I did that
yeah,
all the time, playing dumb, doing, just like whatever, but yet being fully coherent of what was going on. That got me out of a lot of trouble because people would underestimate you.
yeah.
They're like, yeah. So
The
here was my
the
secret. Here's my secret back in the day. You ready?
Okay.
So physical fitness was an absolute no-no in the stoner culture. Dude, I always worked out and I always stretched. I never lifted weights or anything like that, but I always stretched out. So when I had to kick a dude in the face to act a fool, I could do it. And
Yeah.
people would be like, they didn't get it. But yeah, I stretch, man. You gotta fucking be limber. That was a big secret of mine on the street.
For me, it was cardio.
Yeah,
When
yeah,
I
being able to run. Oh yeah.
uh,
So you
I'm a
didn't wear
skate
flip flops. You weren't an idiot.
no, no, like, I was so that's another weird thing, like, when we talk about how childhood kind of, like, influences us or just culture. Uh, when I went to do my qualification exam, and I had a bunch of, like, Army SF guys around me who were all doing the same qualification exam, and some athletes and shit like that. I felt like shit. I felt like I don't belong here.
Yeah.
And then I started fucking running like fucking like an and I ran with skateboard shoes on, Edneys. Um, I remember just pulling out the extra tongue I put in there to not fuck up my foot and just tightening them on and never looked back. And when I
Yeah.
got there, I was like, "Holy shit, I have cardio."
Yeah.
Um, cardio, man, that saved my ass for a lot of things. You have, positioned yourself, and I don't know if that's purposeful or not, as this curator of this knowledge base and skill base. Your son is there with you. He's like I could see now that you speak of him and how and him, like how that kind of integrates into what you're doing. I could see the innovation aspect of it. I can see the prototyping and some of these weird, unique items that show up on your feed. Um, other than that, you're also a very active commentator of anything that pops up on the radar. And you and me have had some pretty cool interactions in that way as well, which again, you're one like when people hear me say, let me ask, I probably going to ask you or like a few other people. There's not a lot of people that I ask, but like I remember when the Ukrainian conflict was just fucking setting off, this saboteur Russian guy got fucking grabbed, and his shit was his shit was like put on the ground, and we were trying to figure out what the objects were that the saboteur had,
Right. The
and he had
laser.
yeah
Wasn't it the laser?
he had this nobody can identify
A
it, and I had
Blu-ray.
people, and you're the first one like, what is this thing? That's a fucking Blu-ray laser. It's like, oh, okay. Like, and I remember m- we have a group of people out there, students, and some friends of mine who were in that conflict, and they were like trying to figure it out, and they were talking to people with fucking high level shit, and they couldn't figure out what the fuck that was. And I remember just saying, "Oh, a friend of mine, it's a Blu-ray laser." Like, no, like what? And it became a whole fucking thing. They were using them to designate buildings as
Right.
targets or for
Well,
signaling.
they got good range, and they're mostly UV, they're mostly invisible. They're actually very dangerous because of the bounce back and stuff. They come out of China and they're not clean. They're dangerous. They can fuck your retinas up pretty easy. I try to keep up on what tech is. I've always been involved in tech. The problem with using tech or real tricky kind of ninja things is it can take a long time for it to come about, and you can't carry all this shit because you don't know when it's going to come up. So you got these problems. But I will tell you, I did actually use one time, you know, the little balls that you throw down that make the flash and the smoke?
Yeah, yeah,
Carried one for 8 months. And I finally got to use it one night. And I was just like, and when people see that, because most people don't realize how magic, you know, sleight of hand and how all that is set up. You never tell the trick or whatever. But people were like, holy shit, dude. Fucking 8 months. Eight
yeah.
months, man.
With any trick like that, I'd imagine it's like you can only do it once, really. Like,
Once.
because now everybody's expecting it. This motherfucker has
Nope.
ninja rocks on him.
Yep. No, you only do it fucking once. Yeah. Yeah, no, but a lot of that stuff. And my friend even would be like, my street partner would be like, how the fuck do you pull that stuff off? And I just wouldn't say anything. But really what it is I've had this rotting in my pocket for 2 years. And today was the day, I don't do much of that stuff anymore. I used to do it a lot during the 90s. And I don't talk very much about the 90s, but I did a lot of prop work for bands. I did a lot of producing, and we were putting a lot of the marijuana money into CDs. Because how that shit works, if a band makes it, everybody goes along for the ride. It's a
Yeah,
gamble, though. Most bands don't make it, but you never know. You
yeah,
know, and so I was spent a bunch of time doing that. I bought an argon laser and a helium neon laser, and had a great laser show set up, and did my own pyrotechnics and stuff, mixing my own flash powder and stuff, and worked with some great bands. And I would do these magic tricks, turn water to a solid, and I was always fucking with flash paper and flash cotton and stuff at the after parties and stuff. I was just known for that stuff. And people were like, yeah, that's just Bill, you know. They never knew my last name. In fact, on one of the CDs, I'll show you one time because it's got some other info on it, but it says, uh, Bill, no last name, dude. Because one time this guy almost uttered my last name and I'd yell out of the crowd, no fucking last name. And so they called me Bill, no last name, dude.
You you have a pretty amazing Instagram profile, and I'm gonna recommend everybody, if they can, you, like myself, are shadow banned, and I think they've tried to take down your page a few times as well.
Yeah, well, they don't
Uh,
like tits, man. They want them promoted in a certain way, and I'm very pro female, and I don't know if you know that on there, but I really am, and I try to support that, and I'm not overt pornography or whatever, but the whole thing, and they just don't like it. They say they do, but they don't like it, And a lot of the females that I know, I'm like, is this offensive to you in any way? And they're like, oh no, that's very complimentary. Uh,
yeah,
and so yeah, that's been my biggest problem with Instagram. Is they're like, you're promoting sexual activity.
yeah, and
Get the
it's
fuck out of here. What, you
yeah,
got a pimp? I mean, I
yeah.
wanted to
There's
be
there
one. I don't think I ever pulled it off, but hey,
this
never the
this
weapon shit.
this the account itself, and you can scroll through it for hours, and I've know people that have.
Oh
um,
God, deep dive.
people people ask a lot about a book or somewhere where you can condense a lot of what you know into. Is that something you're
Yeah,
interested in or
I
want
don't
to
know.
figure out?
Maybe when I'm older, I don't know. You got to remember, my son, he considers a lot of this stuff very embarrassing. He doesn't even like the internet. He's not on the internet, and he's to him this stuff is real foolishness.
Yeah,
Dealing
it is.
drugs, LSD. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well,
And
I always tell people, "Don't be me." That's whenever I get asked to sign anything, I'll sign, my name and "Don't be me."
you're
Because
right.
I tell people I'm a cautionary tale, like, nothing you don't
Yeah.
you don't want any of the bullshit that I went through. Like, this is not
Yeah, I
fun.
mean, it's like with his mom, which I call Queen A. You've probably seen her on the thing holding an Uzi and all that shit. Dude, that was her guns. And I tell people all the time, don't get involved with Mexican ice dealers. You may wake up dead.
Yeah,
And that's, and that's just something that happens. My daughter's mom, don't get deep into the drug culture because you may wake up dead. These people
yeah.
are dead. They're gone. My
The
friend blew his brains out because of too much hallucinogen use. It rotted his mind. His mind was rotted. He wasn't the schizophrenic guy. He just rotted his mind. He used to put in a quarter acre of opium poppies every year. We'd go out there and harvest and stuff. And oh yeah, he was a great guy. I miss him a lot, but he ruined his mind.
again, I think you strike me as the prototypical shaman, to put it in a weird
You know
way, I
what?
guess.
I got lucky. I'm nothing but a street punk and a very low level one, but I got lucky because I learned a simple thing on the street. If you're supposed to make a left-hand turn, make a right. And I literally started doing that and I avoided so much trouble. And I also learned that violence is a very bad thing. All the time people will ask me like about knives. They're like, "Oh, I bought a knife. I'm going to carry a knife." I said, "Are you ready to cut the motherfucker up? Are you going to eviscerate the guy? You going to cut his fucking intestines out and bathe in it?" And they're like, "You're sick. That's weird." I said, "Get rid of the knife. That's not going to help you." I
Yeah,
said, "Get some pepper spray."
yeah,
Violence is bad. It,
yeah,
and today it's even worse.
yeah.
It's,
I guess for me, it's when I do a class, it's always like, let me show you a bunch of videos of people that have been visited by this.
oh, smart. Very,
Uh,
very smart.
and then let me then go over all the shit you're going to get into if something happens, right?
Yeah. Civil,
From
criminal. People don't even know.
and also it's like outside of that, psychological. PTSD from it, bloodborne pathogens, having to get on sorts of fucking antivirals afterwards
Yeah.
if somebody
And I'm not just
pukes
talking the
blood
old
into your
school
mouth.
AIDS, which is a very, very small part of it. I'm talking the real problem, hepatitis.
Yeah, Hep
Everybody
C.
I knew had fucking hepatitis back in the day.
Fuck that. Yeah. So
Everybody. So yeah,
the,
people don't understand any of that part of it. And not to mention still to this day, uh, um, I sleep in my own room and people don't wake me up. They'll come down the hall and they'll yell at me. And although I'm pretty good, and it's just from years of being terrorized by friends, or whatever. I mean, I lived at this one house. There was always beer bottles breaking on my door and shit. I had the lock on the inside, one on the outside and one on the inside. And these were my friends. They were my friends. But you know what? They're a bunch of criminal drug addicts, and that's just how you live, man.
yeah,
But years later, when everything calms down, it's like, oh shit. I mean, I've never been in combat. I've never been in a war. I've never been in the military. But, maybe that 2x2 getting broke over my head, or them guys cutting me up that night, or, I got stabbed in the stomach one time and I got peritonitis. I got stuck with a fucking spike, an ice pick, and I was like, it's like a punch in the solar plexus. That's sick. And I was like, I'm okay, man. A couple days later, man, I'm sick.
you're
I'm
not okay.
real sick, dude. And
Yeah.
I went to the hospital and they're like, it's peritonitis. I didn't even know what that was. They said the shit has leaked into your. I'm like, what? What do we do? Well, we'll figure it out. And they did, but I
Fuck.
was super sick and it
Yeah.
didn't stop me. That's the
You
problem with a lot of that kind of stuff. There was no stopping, but oh God, dude.
you survived all of this. You're
Luck.
you're well, we think differently. I think I have a lot of faith in purpose and reasoning and reasons why we're here, Like I'm not a big fan of myself, but I have a 10-year-old who's a pretty big fan of me, and I think
Yeah.
that's probably why I'm here. Um y- again, you have this online persona, and like I have one, and all, but I just want to give you props because I not only witnessed this and I've seen and experienced this myself, with guys like Turner and the Turner CNC guys who are just like me, a bunch of nerds fans, and they like to make cool shit, and they make cool shit. I've seen your influence through them and how they make cool shit and keep on making cool stuff, and how, man, there's not a lot of people who are cool enough to just fucking sit down with somebody and explain something for just to make them better at their craft. And I've seen you many times out of nowhere just get involved and just help people out in that way. So I want to recognize that. I've witnessed that a few times about you.
Well, I like Turner. I've actually met Turner and the guys, as you probably have too. And here's my funny story about Turner. The first time I went down there, he was like, "We don't dress like that around here." I went in a little bit of a character, but the second time he was like, "Oh, okay, this is more normal." But that's just because I'm a chameleon. I try to change who I am, even as an old guy, and I'm fucking super old, dude. I try to change that, and I always did. I mean, back in the day, the metalheads, they thought all the punks were fags. And when I say fag, that doesn't mean like homosexual. It meant anybody that didn't agree with you was a fag in 79. So
Yeah.
you couldn't go into the punk culture if you were a metalhead. Well, I thought both cultures were great. I was even into new wave. I'd put on the skinny tie and go to the clubs. Well, if I got caught doing that, I'd have been banned from the heavy metal club, man. It'd have been, you're a traitor. So I tried to always be a chameleon because I believe that every culture, every part has value. Everything has value. All people have values. They all have this value to me. They really do, unless they criticize me directly for no reason or they're trying to hurt me or my family. I'll listen to anybody. I have no problem with the fucking trans crew, the gay crew, the straight crew, anybody my whole life. You got to remember, I worked in sex clubs. I was a bouncer at Miss Kitty's. I was a bouncer at Deja Vu. I did all that stuff And everything that I talk about with the end was selling dope. I just wanted an end to try to sell dope. It all leads to that. But I worked in those places, man, and you encounter a wide variety of people. Working
Yeah.
in the sex clubs, there's a lot of perverts, dude, of all types. Pedophiles, no. That's everybody across the board. They will get injured in any venue. But some dude that wants to get spanked by looking at a pregnant lady while wearing mommy's pearls. Hey, that's all right, dude. And that's a true story.
Billy, we could probably do this for another hour, but we're getting pretty late.
There you go.
Uh, I wanna invite you back on if you are willing to come back on.
Yeah.
I think if there's anything that shows up on the news that is topical, that is and it's every now and then, Billy, I know there's like, "Hey, look at this thing." And then you're like, "Yeah." And then you show me something you made fucking 30 years ago that is exactly what this person is trying to sell off as new or trade craft stuff that shows up out there. So I want to invite you back to see if you can want to commentate on some of this stuff
Oh
with
yeah,
us.
definitely. Put together something. We can definitely go over that. I'm a big Gauge fan. That's my whole thing. A lot of people think it's all subguns and all this shit, but really the secret is, and what I liked was a 20 gauge. And there's just, I don't know, man. That was
We'll,
my
we'll,
thing. 12's
we
cool, but 20 can be very useful. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? So yeah,
yeah.
that was just kind of my thing back in the day. But yeah, we can get into all that kind of stuff and weird shit, pen guns, and how you actually shoot those, how you have to know the recoil impulse of those. I believe I'm the only person that has legitimate videos of some of the big dogs, 44 Magnum and stuff. How the fuck do you shoot that? You have to know
I, I
certain things.
I think at some point somewhere we're gonna have to have a pig hanging somewhere, and some of these there we'll figure that out. That
Yeah,
would be that'd be a cool historical
yeah.
video to have for the future. Billy, thank you so much for allowing me to sit down with you and have this conversation. I know that you can't travel because of some of our past, and
Sins
I
of the
could
past,
make
man. I fucked up. I
w-
fucked up my identity is what I did. And that's a
but
warning to people. If you're not gonna commit to it for your life, don't fuck around with everything.
but even though you did all that, you still have shown both me and many other people that I consider of high value and really close friends. You've educated a lot of us, and you've pointed us the right way. You told us not to be stupid by going down the wrong path, like with me a few times when I'm trying to figure some shit out. So you're like, nah, that's the wrong way to go. Go over here.
Well, you know what I tell
In
people? Heroin sums it up. A lot of guys have asked me, I want to try heroin. I'm like, you know what? Go ahead, try heroin. Just remember though, you ride that horse into the woods, you may not come out. And that is the truth of the whole thing. You want to go out in the street and fuck people up and pull your gun and pull your knife and shit. You better be ready because either you're going to die at some point or you're going to go to prison. And I'm going to tell you right now, prison, there's some bad guys in there. You think
Yeah,
you're the baddest dude, you're nothing. There's some really weird dudes in prison. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
That's where they put the weirdest of the weirdest. That's where you don't want to be. So yeah, and I want to tell you that I appreciate you as far as the EDC thing and everything that you've done. I've learned a lot from you. I respect you. I am just totally fucking impressed all the way across the board at you have taken this, dare I say, Mexican ninja and developed it into this mature businessman. That's what I'm seeing.
thank
That's
you.
what I am seeing.
I'm just this kid from TJ who likes cool stuff, who nerds out on people that make cool stuff like yourself, and also are just constantly trying to
Yeah,
learn
but
how
you're
to.
fucking pulling it off and you're still doing it while being cool. And that's hard to do. It's hard to be a balanced businessman because the real world, you can't act like this in the real world. Dude, this
Yeah,
is this is this is a crazy, crazy thing. You have to act like you are. You have to
yeah.
be straight up, but you're doing some weird stuff too. You're hanging pigs and you're getting paid for it. Bravo.
It's a living. It's also a cool experience, and again, I'd rather know than somebody tell me. this is kind of like the main part of the manifesto. Show me, don't tell me.
I promise you that you will retire an old man doing the same thing. And at one point, you're gonna be the old man in the dojo saying, "No, that's not how we hang the pig. Do it like this." You watch. You'll
I'll
remember
have
me.
a I'll have my fifth ace hanging right
Right.
here like a medallion. I'll
That's a
just need
pretty
to
big
figure
thing.
you know you well, we can't talk about that specific thing, but it's a long-term project that I've been working on with you on with that, you will hopefully one day people will figure that out, but it's getting there. It's getting there. You'll see. Um, Billy, again, thank you so much, on behalf of a big part of this community, which, I represent. Thank you for the knowledge. Thank you for the history that you've saved for us. Thank you for the stories. Thank you for the information as always. And again, thank you for having me for coming on with us and sharing your story.
Thanks, man.